Hello, everyone. Welcome to Kyron Horman Case Revisited. My name is Samantha. This is my partner, Kaylia.
Hello, everyone.
How is everyone doing tonight? This
I
won't be a 4-hour live.
I was going to say I'm glad we're here. It's going to be a shorter one. Looks like my avatar's here tonight. That's nice to see.
Right? I know it's nice seeing it at least like move a little bit instead of having like a blink spot.
Yeah, exactly. That's funny.
Well, I hope everyone's having a good night. It's the end of the weekend, so everybody's just kind of like winding down. Um, yeah, tonight's live, we are doing Dede Spicher. Actions speak louder than words. And we're going over the BOC, which is Blink on Crime interview that Dede did on September 4, 2003 with Christina Stoy. It has been one of the only times that Dede's ever spoken publicly really about anything. So we're kind of excited to do this. This was Kaylia's idea. I thought it was amazing. It's like, yeah, let's go over this because she found some things in there and she's like, let's just go over this. And since our last live was so long, we decided like, hey, let's just do a whole live because there's a part one and a part two to this interview. Depending on how long the part one goes, will depend on whether or not we actually have a part two live. But I don't think it's going to take us long really to go through everything. Um, we want to
Yeah.
encourage everyone to like ask questions and comments. Kaylee is amazing with multitasking. So she'll be in the comment section. Keep an eye out for her. And yeah, keep those questions coming. I'm sure you guys are going to have, questions. I know me and Kaylee did after, really looking into this and taking notes and stuff. So,
Right. Especially if you're somebody that, you know, watches a lot of true crime stuff. That's kind of the where my mindset was when I was reading these responses from Dede and thinking about other true crime cases and how it just doesn't match up and left me just wondering, is it true? I don't know. It's just my opinion. We'll get into
well,
that.
yeah. Well, it's just Dee Dee's the one who's talking in this interview, and we have no way to verify what she's saying is actually true. And
Right.
that's one of the reasons why, we want to go through this and have people on here to like, you know, even come back later and watch it if you can't stay the entire live. Just like dive deep with us into this interview and see what you guys think because I am really interested in other people's opinions too.
Yes, definitely. Yeah, I'll be watching the comments. So yeah, I'll be reading them as they come in. I have dual screens, multitasking at its finest.
I know. And I've got two different colors on my sheets. Okay. So, unless anybody has any questions, we're just going to dive into this. Um, in the days following the disappearance of 7-year-old Kyron Horman from the Skyline School on June 4th, 2010, Horman's inner circle of friends, family, and associates, casual acquaintances, shop clerks, and gym employees were deluged by law enforcement. Did I say that right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Word spread quickly that law enforcement was after anyone who knew, might have known, or had any dealings with Terri Horman. The term used to describe law enforcement behavior towards potential witnesses was bullying, which I kind of think is like crap. I mean, some of these people didn't even want to cooperate with police to begin with, so the fact that they used the word bullying is kind of inaccurate as far as I'm concerned.
Right. Mm-hmm.
As the president of her former condominium owners association, Dede Spicer was involved in helping the association with litigation against the condo's builder. Spicer had a working relationship with the association's legal team, and one afternoon she um, casually mentioned the investigation into Kyron's disappearance to the association's legal team, although Dede had not been contacted by law enforcement. Counsel for her condo association recommended to Dede that, in light of what Dede had heard about the investigation, if law enforcement were to contact her, she should agree to interview with the consul present. She asked the attorney to sit in if that happened, to which he agreed. He quickly referred Spicer to attorney Chad Stavely. So I know you have some notes here.
Yeah, I was trying to verify if the HOA was doing any litigation towards the builder, like it mentions. And Oregon does have a pretty good public record system, especially for basically any court cases for any court. It's all on one website, the Oregon Department of Justice judicial website. And I couldn't find anything that said that there was any litigation between those companies, or those business entities, the HOA and the builder. I would have to look what exactly the condo association's name was. I did try to verify this, but I couldn't independently verify if that was true or not, which you would if it really happened. There would be a record, even if there was a settlement or something. If there was some kind of litigation brought in court, there would be a record of it in the Oregon record.
Right.
So
Well, I believe that if you didn't find anything, it may not even be out there. I mean,
right.
It may or may not. I'm not saying, but
Exactly.
I'm just saying you're pretty good at looking at stuff online and you didn't find anything. What I found really peculiar about this entire paragraph is that it talks about her talking to people that, there's a lawyer here she's talking to. They're giving her advice. She's pretty much almost seeking counsel here. And she hasn't even been spoken to by police. She hasn't even had the finger pointed at her yet. And they're already telling her, according to her, that, well, before you talk to anybody, seek counsel.
Right. And it kind of matches, because if, I don't know when Terri and Dede started talking again, because their story is that they hadn't spoken to each other in months since Terri's birthday, apparently in March. But how did Dede know how the investigation was going? That's what her words are here, is that based on how she casually mentioned the investigation into Kyron's disappearance to the legal team. And although she hadn't been contacted by law enforcement, counsel advised her to basically, in light of what Dede had heard about the investigation, if she were to be contacted, she should only be speaking to them with legal counsel. That speaks volumes to me, because either Terri told her this is going bad, and they had been talking in those weeks between the time Kyron disappeared and Dede moved in, or she was, obviously I think they were, but if she's going to say she wasn't, then how did she know how the investigation was going? And that she would
there's
need
a lot of
lawyer.
media and stuff going on during that time. I mean, she could have been just hearing stuff from the media, but
yes,
that
that's
early
true.
on, there wasn't even any fingers being pointed yet at Terri early on.
Really, not much.
Not too early.
Not publicly, not until like June 18th or 20th or something. It was all just because her story wasn't adding up. It was changing, and she wasn't able to clear herself. That's why the heat was being put on her. And then they release that publicly a little later. But, you know, I still think that, you know, when Terri's other friend, Jamie F., went on public TV national network, giving an interview on Terri's behalf, she even said that Terri was frustrated with how the interview or investigation was pointed at her. So
Right.
was Terri telling all of her friends this? Was, you know, who knows? I believe so. She was obviously telling Jamie F. this,
Right.
and Kane and Desiree were saying that too. So it's definitely could have been that, you know, I just find it strange that Terri and Dede try to say that they weren't close friends, but Dede dropped everything to come to her, you know, all of a sudden
Rescue.
on June 28th. So
Yeah.
yeah, and we'll get to talking a little bit more about that later too. So that's also an interesting point.
So, with a search warrant in hand, the electronic devices only, to which Dede directed investigators, law enforcement proceeded to search her entire home. Multnomah County Detective Keith Karev asked Spicer to answer some questions. Dede said she replied, "I would be happy to answer any and all questions you have, but I would like to do so in the presence of counsel." Law enforcement, in turn, began a prolonged and highly orchestrated effort to bully Dede Spicer. Again, there's that word bully, even though people aren't cooperating in the beginning. When I first introduced myself to Miss Spicer, this is Christina Stoy speaking. I offered my apologies for what she had been through, and told her that in my personal opinion she had been unfairly maligned, if not persecuted. I thanked her for her trust of me to tell her story. Miss Spicer paid me some kind compliments on my coverage of Kyron's case to date. I found her extremely bright, animated, and witty, with a charmingly confident and
So
self-deprecating sense of expression. I also found Miss Spicer to be very naive, even now, as to the standards, protocols, and practices utilized by law enforcement, which I highlighted right there because I'm just like, wait a minute. Her dad's a sheriff.
yeah, her dad was
How naive is she?
right. He was a lifelong sheriff, um, for the Klamath County Sheriff's Office down there. And I think it's interesting that it's pointed out as being naive here as well, because, like I said, I agree with this statement. A lot of this sounds far fetched and naive. Like, did this happen? I take it as untruthful. Christina Stoy takes it as naive. So you guys take
Right.
it for what you want, but it is very far fetched sounding. So
I know. And then it says, I can't say that I blame Miss Spicer for trusting law enforcement so blindly. The fact is, she grew up around law enforcement but saw very little about the actual workings of the investigation. Miss Spicer is the daughter of a well respected, now retired deputy with the Klamath Falls Sheriff's Office. Now that says deputy. Was he a deputy or was he a sheriff? I just caught
um
that.
he was like a Marine sheriff. I'm don't think he was like the head sheriff. He might have been just a sheriff deputy, but he worked there from the 90s, maybe even late 80s on.
Yeah, as
Uh
soon as I saw deputy, I'm like, we better clarify this right now because I don't want to be saying that he was a sheriff and then,
Let
you
me
know,
see. I think I have a screenshot because unfortunately my iPad got restarted today by my kids.
I'll keep reading. It says, at times I found myself questioning if it would be able to exhibit the sort of resilience this woman has. Probably not. I found Dede Spicer to be unwavering as to her account of the events on June 4th, 2010 and ensuing dates. It was only a few weeks later, during a meeting with MCSO detectives Mark Heron and Keith Karev, that investigators unofficially cleared Dede Spicer of any involvement in Kyron's disappearance or of having any knowledge of anyone else. She is hopeful that Multnomah County District Attorney Rod Underhill will issue a public statement from his office clearing her officially.
Okay, I just looked. Her dad was a Marine deputy. So he wasn't a
Okay.
sheriff, he was a Marine deputy. And then, second point, as you just finished that little section of reading, I highlighted here on my own notes about MCSO Detective Mark Herron. When I tried to look into this as well, Mark Herron works for the Multnomah County Sheriff's Office in the Search and Rescue Department as a river patrol. So I find it interesting that Dede says that Mark Herron was a detective here and unofficially cleared him. Because would that be the job duties of a river patrol deputy? I don't know. I don't work for the Multnomah County Sheriff's Office, so I'm only bringing that up as an interesting observation of would that even be something in the realm of what Mark Herron would be doing if he was in
Well, I
search
know
and
all
rescue.
of the officers at MCSO, they are all usually they will do something for a few months and then move into another section and then move into another section. They kind of jump all over, but all of them do like search and rescue stuff. So I'm not sure. But I know that it mentions here that she is cleared. And then I found this article that said Dede Spicher reveals that after 3 years of attempting to provide Multnomah County Sheriff's Office as well as Assistant Deputy Attorney Norm Frink with the necessary information they requested to clear her from any suspicion in the circumstances surrounding the disappearance of Skyline second grader Kyron Horman, she has finally been cleared after passing a polygraph as part of her requirement under an immunity deal that has been sealed with the court, unofficially cleared, that is. Spicer, her and her attorney, Chad Stavely, who have since refused to local media requests, would very much like the Multnomah County Sheriff's Office and current District Attorney Rod Underhill to clear her officially and publicly. And it's odd indeed that you have to clear her name when you have been charged with no crime.
Yeah, right. And just like I mentioned in yesterday's, or not yesterday, but earlier's live, the other day, if Dede can unofficially clear herself, which I, again, don't know if I believe personally, just playing devil's advocate, why can't Terri do so? And Terri has much more at stake to do so. Her interests to do so are much greater than Dede's.
Right.
But
Exactly.
yet here's Dede on Blink on a Crime, at least claiming that she's unofficially cleared herself, and Terri still has done nothing and still has, unfortunately, sadly, abandoned her daughter to avoid doing so. So,
Right. And I just put up the Blink on Crime interview. It would be really hard for anybody to read it, but I want to keep it up there. We like to have our information that we're reading from or that we're showing on,
I'll
just to let people
also
know that we have it.
I'll also put the link in the comments too. It's linked through the Wayback Machine. So if you want to read along too,
Yeah, so to date, neither the Multnomah County Sheriff's Office nor the DDA's office has publicly cleared or declared any persons cleared in the active investigation. Dede is adamant that she was not involved, nor did she ever see anything that led her to believe Terri Horman was involved. And the statement that no one else had been cleared, I know that you highlighted, because didn't you see in that HLN interview, wasn't it that where they
oh yeah.
said that they were clearing people? Who did you see cleared in that interview or in that
Well,
HLN show?
they didn't come out and say, of course the police have never come out and said anybody's been cleared,
Right.
but I do believe the parents, and both Kane and Desiree were talking about clearing themselves and how they were the very first people that needed to clear themselves. So they were doing whatever they needed to do, but Terri was the only one who wasn't. So that leads, they basically were saying, okay, Kane was cleared because they said Kane's alibi was tight. He was doing XYZ. Then they moved on to Desiree. She was doing XYZ. And then they did Tony. So they kind of like said it like that. Like they did clear everybody one by one, because
Right.
they had to make sure. They weren't sure. They couldn't just take everybody's word for it. They had to make sure themselves. So yeah,
Well,
I think
usually in a child missing case, the first people that they look at is the family members so that they can move along to determine whether or not it had something to do with someone in the family or whether or not this had something to do with a stranger.
exactly.
So Dede spoke freely and without hesitation as to the relentless harassment she experienced at the hands of law enforcement. Once again, she's claiming to be harassed, bullied. She's almost acting like Terri, just like poor me, feel sorry for me or something.
Yeah.
However, Dede is adamant that she does not want this piece to express any sort of pity, Dede perspective. She does not want anyone to feel sorry for her. Dede hopes that by speaking publicly, the public's curiosity will be satisfied and the focus of the investigation into Kyron's disappearance can return to an actual investigation. This is her story. And Christina Stoy calls it in her own words. That's where you got that in your own words. I did like that, by the way.
Oh, thanks.
And on a positive note, I have met some really nice people out of all of this. So that's how I choose to look at it. I can't control other people's actions or opinions about me. This is Dede speaking. I did not know anything. I never knew anything. And I could not get them, law enforcement, to believe me for over 3 years. And then I made a note, but yet here she's saying that she's cleared. She's literally saying for 3 years they haven't believed her, but in the beginning of the interview she's talking about being cleared.
Right.
And
And
since
then
the sorry.
Desiree, sorry to interrupt, but Desiree and her attorney also confirmed that she wasn't cooperating as well. So she's acting like she was doing everything she could and it took this long. But the truth is she was dragging her feet along the way and not wanting to cooperate with police. And I don't know what the motivation was to finally accept the deal 3 years later, but she, acting like she was doing everything she could for 3 years doesn't sound truthful to me.
Right. And since the investigation started, I believe they were able to narrow the time I was supposedly missing. Never left the property, but they never shared that with me and have not to this day. And it's kind of odd that she even chooses to use the words that law enforcement were able to narrow the time I supposedly was missing.
Right.
I mean, why it's like I'm pointing the finger at myself, and then I'm going to tell you never left the property.
And then, okay, so remember, Samantha, when we were talking about this interview before the live, how I told you some of it sounds like they're trying to make it seem like they're in person and some of it sounds like it's typed. This is one of those examples because who would write that in the parentheses? If she's actually saying this with her words, she would never insert never was, never left the property. In my opinion, it doesn't sound natural. At least it sounds
It doesn't sound natural.
No.
Yeah, it could have been typed. Maybe they were doing it in emails. Maybe they did phone conversation and emails.
Yes. I just wanted to point that out because then as we go on, you'll see other parts where they insert laughs, like they're in person and they're laughing together. So it's like I can't tell which one they're trying to portray this as or how it happened. Just wanted to put that as an example.
And then she goes on, there was no communication between Terri and I since her birthday party in March 2010, and we had only been in touch the December before that in 2009. Terri and I were not best buds. I think that was something investigators were really hung up on. They could not understand that I would rush to someone's aid that on the surface was a more casual friend. They saw that as behavior of someone that had something to hide or as a motive of some kind. What investigators believed that motive was, they certainly never shared that with Dede Spicher. So that's interesting.
Yes. Do you want me to take over reading a little? I can jump in, by the way.
Yeah, you can. Yeah.
Okay. Alrighty. No ride school alum. I didn't get that reference. There's a link here, but I didn't look into that. But the interview continues. Investigators pummeled Dede from the very start. You were missing at the same time that we can't pin down Terri Horman's whereabouts. Why did Terri pick you up? Did someone else pick you up and bring you back? We know that you left the property. We have proof. These are questions demanded from Dede Spicher over and over again for 3 straight years, no matter what she did to accommodate law enforcement. And she and her attorney, Chad Stavely, went through extraordinary means by any standards to assist law enforcement. Investigators refused to believe she had no knowledge of the circumstances of Kyron's disappearance until now. Dede
But then
Spicer's
once again, in the assisted law enforcement, and she's talking about 3 straight years, but yet you have Desiree Young and Kane Horman saying there's no cooperation going on.
Yep.
She keeps going with this, I cooperated. Like she's really trying to get everyone to believe it or something.
And, I think that police do lie to people in interrogations. I know that is definitely a tactic police use, but, if these are truthful questions that are written, Dede told Christina Stoy that she was asked, she was told by, police, you were missing at the same time. We can't pin down Terri. Why did Terri pick you up? Did someone else pick you up and bring you back? We know you left the property. We have proof. So they could be bluffing, or maybe they aren't, I mean, maybe, who knows? All we know is that she's never been officially cleared. So
in the live that we did the other day, I showed everyone there was, I can't remember where the statement come from, but someone saw her leave the property and somebody saw her come back to the property.
yes,
Because that's the reason why they had mentioned, how did you put it, when that she left the property?
Abruptly left. Yes.
Yep.
So that's it's like she was there and then she wasn't. That's what abruptly means.
And in her own words, she even says, like, when you're on the property, you can kind of see everyone that's out there on the property because of the way that the property's set up. So someone could have seen her abruptly leave because she tried to make it sound like she was ducked down in the grass. Nobody could see her. But then in another part, she literally says, you can see everybody out on the property because of the way it's laid out.
Yeah. Exactly.
And then that Dede Spicher's story has never wavered. We've already found at least one lie that we know of. We have her on People magazine saying that Terry's parents asked her to come stay with Terri during that 11-day stay that started on June 28th. And then in this interview, she says that Terri calls her.
And yeah, she says, I need you now. And Dede came to Terry's aid at that time. And she says that in this interview. So we'll definitely keep going. Dede Spicher's story has never wavered. Dede arrived at her job at Westwind Farm Studio, a sprawling and lush 40-plus acre property scheduled to be on the Garden Conservatory tour the next day. She parked at the main house, left her cell phone, which was turned on, and her lunch cooler in her Ford Explorer. She went inside the main house to check for her assignment, and for the first time since working there, she was invited to lunch with the others at the house. There was no time set. The invitation was open-ended, she believed, based on the timing of her project completions at the other end of the property. This was Spicer's customary daily routine. Her duties in preparation for the garden tour took her to the end of the grounds for the bulk of the morning near the road. Where she was working, bent over in tall grass and vegetation, is not visible from the main house. Again, we, just pointing out that they knew where she was. They gave her the project where she needed to be by the road. And if you missed the live from a couple nights ago, Samantha does show how close she was working to the road, how close the property is to the road, and it would have been
It's
so
literally feet.
easy. Yes, it would have been so easy for somebody to swing by and pick her up and drop her off. Very,
You
very,
know
very
what?
easy.
After our live, when I actually mentioned that parking lot that's on Skyline Boulevard and
Uh-huh.
and Germantown Road, which is just right there, right off of Old Germantown Road, I'm seriously like, if no one drove by and picked her up off of that road, she could have easily jumped that fence and went to that parking lot and had a vehicle waiting for her there. It's literally less than an eighth of a mile.
See,
And Dede
exactly.
used to be a
Right.
runner,
Yeah. Yeah.
so that's nothing to her. So
All right, continuing. Spicer was not wearing a watch nor carrying her cell phone and headed to the house for lunch after completing her work on one section of the property. When she arrived, she was told that Miss Hawkinsmith tried calling Dede's name outside when everyone was ready for lunch. When Dede did not respond and could not be seen from the main house, Miss Hawkinsmith also called Dede's cell phone. Spicer said she apologized and explained her project's location and status, which she was given the project earlier by Miss Hawkinsmith, so she wouldn't
I
need to
love that you
explain that.
highlighted that
It's
because as
like,
soon as I read it, I was saying the same thing. Like, Spicer said she apologized and explained her project's location and status. When
yes.
up here, it literally said she went inside to the main house to check in for her assignment. Miss Hawkinsmith gave her assignment on the property near the road. Like,
Yes. It's just
what
like,
the
come on.
hell?
And then well, also, just pausing again, if you think about it, if she would have started working that day at 9 a.m., or even 10 a.m., 10 to 11 or 10 to 1 or 9 to 1, that's a long time to be working out in the yard. Like, I mean, I don't know. I do a lot of gardening, and that's a long time to like not have interaction with any other person,
I don't
you
know.
know?
I don't know how you garden, but when I garden, I'm like earthing out there. I have a huge garden and I can be out there for hours. Someone could ask me what time it was, and I'll be like, I don't know, because I just don't even keep track time because I'm out there sometimes, a
Yes.
half a day, but it only feels like I've only been out there for a couple of hours.
It does go by fast. I mean, I definitely love I don't have a huge garden. Like, and I know she was on 40 acres, but still, I mean,
Right.
if you, I don't know, it just seems like, was her project going to take hours of the tour was the next day? Like, how much did she really need to do it, in this luscious groomed property? But
Well, and another question for everybody is like, what time do you guys eat lunch? Isn't lunch usually like 11, 12,
yeah,
maybe 1? And she's supposed to go back up to the house come lunchtime?
yep, exactly. Alrighty, and then let's keep going. Dede resumed her workday to completion. Her cell phone records confirm this account. On one occasion, at the request of law enforcement, Spicer agreed to walk the property and demonstrate her activities that day. During one reenactment, a female investigator attempted to mimic Hawkinsmith's lunch call while Spicer was out near the property line. Spicer heard the investigator's call. So, again, it says on one occasion, at the request of law enforcement, Spicer agreed to walk the property line, and it was during one reenactment. So it sounds like they were trying to do it over and over again, trying
Or
to.
maybe they had like her up at the house calling over another piece of property calling because remember, there was Miss Hawkinsmith and other employees hollering. They're
Right.
walking the property hollering. They're wanting to know if she can hear people. And after
Yes.
reading this, I'm like, maybe they were doing it from like different locations. But you
Yep.
know what? She's going to hear somebody. And she's
Yeah.
going to have law enforcement standing right next to her. She's not going to be able to deny the fact that she can't hear it because the law enforcement standing right next to her going like, I hear it. Do you hear it?
Yeah, right. Exactly. You can't deny it when there's other people around. This is Dede actual words. She says, I heard that person that day. They never told me where she was standing. I just know I could not see her, which is easy to do if you saw the grounds. I don't know why I never heard the property owner that day, except to say I try to be very mindful when I am working, and gardening is a love of mine I tend to immerse in. It was the first time I was invited to lunch, and I was looking forward to sharing the meal on break. Had I heard her, I would have stopped immediately and headed in. It was a nice treat. I highlighted this because, again, she says they never told me where she was standing. I just know I could not see her, which is easy to do if you saw the grounds. Um, I don't know why I never heard the property owner that day, except I was very mindful when I was working. But she also goes on later to say that she saw that vendor. So I just, again, find it very contradictory. How are you
And
going to hear a random vendor but not your boss that's calling for you?
right, and up there before, I didn't mention this during my last live, but when I was up there before, I actually started hollering up there because I wanted to see if there was an echo, and there's an echo up there. So
Right. Yeah,
I
I
don't
believe that.
understand why she's not hearing these people call her when there's
Yep.
actual echoes. Like it's a very quiet community all the way down that old Germantown road. So the
Mm-hmm.
fact that she's not hearing it, that it's like echoing. And it's just
So
really strange that she's
suspicious.
not hearing
Yeah.
anybody. Let's go over a couple comments here. We have Ded Brooks. When you insert yourself in a questionable person's life, people are going to question you. You spend how many days at Terry's house? Yeah, she spent 11 days there. And then let's see, what else we got here? Cody Jensen. Hello, everyone. Hello, Cody. I'm sorry to interrupt you. I thought we had more than that.
That's all good. All right. Christina Stoy, she writes, it sounded like an innocent explanation. I asked Dede why investigators did not believe her. She responded, I was repeatedly questioned, hounded. My home and belongings were taken and searched for some time. Law enforcement kept telling me in interviews I agreed to participate in, by the way, that the only way to clear myself was to take a polygraph, which my attorney advised me not to. Since I had been told by Terri that she was told she failed when she was adamant that she was being truthful, I had no desire to be set up like that. I do not know to this day if Terri actually failed any polygraphs or if law enforcement just told her they did. I know that once she told me that, investigators claimed she failed her polygraph. My advice to her was that she should not speak to anyone without an attorney, but she continued to ignore it, I think for a few more days, as I recall. I don't think I was the only person or friend telling her that. Um, in a recent interview that I found that I shared from the Kyron Horman World Soldiers old interview that I shared with Desiree, where
Mm-hmm.
she said that she was surprised to hear Terri blaming the failed polygraph on the being deaf in one ear thing because Terri had never used that excuse, or at least Desiree had never heard her say that was the reason why she
Right.
she failed for 5.5 years. Well, this also kind of corroborates that, in my opinion, because why would Dede not say that? Dede isn't deaf in one ear. So if Terry's over here saying the I failed because I'm deaf in one ear, then
Right.
Dede would have felt a little better about being able to go in there and pass because she's like, well, I'm not deaf in one ear and I'm telling the truth. Instead,
Well,
she's over,
yeah.
she's just getting from Terri that Terry's probably just saying, I told the truth and it came up that I failed. And that's making Dede say, well, just saying, let's say Dede's saying, being honest here, that's freaking her out. She doesn't want to go set herself up for that. I could see that. And that to me confirms what Desiree's saying, that Terri never said she was deaf in one ear, and that's why she failed the polygraph up until she gave those interviews in 2016. Because if she did, I'm sure Dede would have said that here in this interview.
Well, yeah, and they're making all these excuses why they don't want her to do a polygraph, but she turns around and ends up doing a polygraph later on anyway.
Yeah, right. Yep. And yeah, we'll keep talking about that, how it just contradicts what we know and stuff. Editors note Blink on Crime has been able to confirm through an independent source, which does not wish to be identified publicly, that Terri Horman was referred to her criminal defense attorney, Stephen House, via a family friend and attorney located in Bend, Oregon. Subsequently, Kane Horman requested a search of the Bend attorney's property and indicated that Kyron may have gone there. If true, interesting. I just think that's
I
interesting.
put a question mark and put weird. Like, what a
Yes.
weird thing for, like, Kane is asking them to go look at this attorney's um,
Yeah.
office.
This is
That's
very,
just
very
weird to me.
peculiar. And,
But maybe, Kane was just having them search anywhere of any person that Terri was mentioning. You
I
know what
will
I mean?
say,
Like, if
whenever
they were
she,
connected to Terri, we're going to go search there.
and she also, when she said the 350,000 thing, that's how much she paid for her attorney, that was huge red flags, and that was a huge contention in their court battle, because Kane was trying to get her to say where she got the money, and he was also trying to say that that was marital assets and he was entitled to half of it.
Right.
And she was trying to protect where she got the money from. And so I could see where, if he's saying that we don't know where she got that money from, and maybe on the grounds of maybe she sold Kyron and that's how she obtained this $350,000 and won't tell us how, then I could see how he would say you need to search anything like that. Otherwise, that's kind of
Right.
just a weird random thing. I don't see how the police would even be able to get a search warrant for that just by being related to Terri, because that's just so weird. But anyway, that's just my thoughts.
Right. Mine too.
It was either completely naive or bold for Spicer to submit to a polygraph under those conditions. She was, by her own account, telling the truth and then being punished for it. However, investigators were adamant at proving a theory that Spicer left the Westwind farm. I asked, considering there is absolutely no communication between you and anyone else, and you are working on a 40-acre farm on this day, wouldn't it be true that the theory had to be that? Spicer interrupted. Yes, that Terri swung by and picked me up for some reason, or some other unknown person. The problem with that theory is that it required another person who is not at the farm to know where Spicer was working that day to come meet her without being seen by anyone else and without communication with anyone else. I just would like to add, what if her job duty was not to be at the side of the road and that's just where she told them she would be? And that would, if this was all pre-planned, then
Yep.
she could have said, "Meet me at
Me,
this
yeah.
gate," you know, and it would have been totally fine to pick her up without needing to communicate. And second of all, we don't know if they had no burner phones at that time. I mean, we know they bought some later.
You brought
So
up all of the points that I was going to bring up. This whole and without communication with anyone else. We can't even trust that statement because they bought burner phones to communicate between themselves at the
yes,
end of June.
right.
So how do we know that they didn't have them then? The only reason why anyone even found out about the burner phones that they used at the end of June is because the other woman, not Dede, but the other woman that brought the phone, she told law enforcement about the burner phones, and they probably would have never even found out about them. And to this day, I cannot find any verifiable proof that law enforcement ever got their hands on any of those cell phones
I believe I asked Terri
or
Horman that
burner phones.
directly before I was banned from that other group, and I'll have to look through my screenshots, but if I can remember correctly, she replied to me, but she did not acknowledge that question. Because I was bringing that up, and I think I asked her, did the police ever get those phones? Um, and then another thing, darn, what was I about to say? Oh, it's funny that Spicer here, her own words, supposedly, she says, yes, that Terri swung by and picked me up for some reason, or some other unknown person. I find that very peculiar. That
And no, she
Terri
mentions
picked
another
me up.
unknown person, and Terri picked her up.
Yeah, Terri swung by and picked me up for some reason. Well, what reason do you think? We're not accusing you guys of going out and getting your toenails painted. Okay,
Right.
so
Yeah,
why
what
would you?
is with the for some
Yes.
reason? For some reason. What the
Why are you
hell?
exactly? It's just, to me again. It's just like just making light of the situation of not taking it seriously. Like, a child is missing here, and you guys have so many red flags, and then you just act like it's no big deal. It's just bizarre to me.
Yep.
Spicer continues, on several occasions, I reminded investigators that there was a witness to where I was working on the property on June 4th, 2010, which I surmise would complete whatever timeline holes that they thought I had. This has never been released publicly, but there was also an artisan show market sale on the property the next day. There were a few vendors in and out of the property that day, but I remembered one specifically while I was working near the road that morning. I was there when he dropped off his pots and pottery and whatever else he had to sell or show. Again, it just, why did you see him, but why did you not hear or see your boss that was looking for you?
And why haven't law enforcement ever been able to confirm it?
Yep.
And she also says here that that this has never been publicly released, but there was an artisan show market sale on the property the next day. But that information was released because people had to buy tickets to go to that
Right.
tour
Yeah,
the next day.
exactly. Yep. The artist driver who delivered his pottery was in his late 20s to early 30s and drove a red pickup. Stoy. So law enforcement knew that there was a witness from day one that could corroborate your logistics on the property and approximate your timing. Is that correct? Spicer. Yes, I did not know the man's name or the name of his creations or anything. And when I asked law enforcement for the information to provide my attorney, they refused to even say if they spoke to him or if they were now satisfied I was where I said I was at the time. They declined to provide it to my attorney as well. And by that time, Miss Hawkins Smith had an attorney as well, so I was not permitted to just call her and ask. I even went to the Saturday market a few times to see if I could locate him myself. And if Spicer had an attorney at this time, what's stopping her attorney from contacting Hawkins Smith's attorney and figuring
It's
this out
exactly
together?
what my notes just said.
It's
My
like,
notes are right saying the same thing. Her attorney could have contacted Miss Hawkins Smith's attorney, gotten that information from Miss Hawkins Smith. That name could have
yes,
been brought forward. Then law enforcement could have called and talked to this man
right.
and confirmed that they saw each other if it is true.
If what Dede says about her attorney is true throughout this interview, she had the worst freaking attorney of all time.
Well,
And
we're talking about 2013 too, and she's sitting here saying this, but she doesn't even go on and say anything like, eventually, my attorney did contact Miss Hawkins Smith's attorney.
no, right. She
Nothing.
just makes it seem like, oh, we just never know. Yeah. Um, and then Stoy asks, why did Miss Hawkins Smith need an attorney? If you know, Spicer replies, I assume it was because all kinds of people were showing up at her property and pounding on the gates, etc. She was hounded by the media for weeks, and all because she gave me a job. I was horrified for her, all because of me. Stoy, was there any connection between Hawkins Smith and the Hormans? Spicer, not that I'm aware of. They were on completely different socio-economic levels, and their kids went to a French American school, not Skyline. I would not even know where they would bump into each other. Stoy, has anyone ever mentioned to you whether Hawkins Smith hired Rudy Sanchez at any time? Spicer, no, did she? Stoy, I'm going to need to check my archives on that one. I thought so, but I could be confusing her with a different property owner. Editor's note: Hawkinsmith's friend and fellow farm owner Jean Ann Von Crevelin did hire RS Landscaping Maintenance. Dede Spicer was interning with Miss Von Crevelin and was referred to Mary Ellen Hawkinsmith to work on her property. It was not to be a paid position, as Miss Spicer was willing to work for her sweat to learn all that she could at the time. Spicer said she has never met Rudy Sanchez, nor has she observed him on either property. And um, I didn't read it myself, but did you say that you read in the deposition that she did confirm she worked for Miss Von Crevelin for a few months?
Yep. On page 44 of the deposition from 2012, there is a question and they're asking her about her work on Miss Vaughn's farm. And she is answering the questions and telling them that she knew that she did work there. She thought she had worked there for a few months because they were asking her about it. And if
Yeah.
anybody doesn't know, that Rudy Sanchez landscape company, Rudy Sanchez is the landscaper that Terri Horman hired on her property in fall of 2009.
Yes. So just another weird
So
coincidental connection.
yeah. And Dede Spicer started working for Westwood Farms just a couple months before Kyron came up missing. So you have James that moves out, Rudy Sanchez, um, allegedly hired shortly thereafter to kill Kane. And then not very long after that, Dede goes and works for this farm. And then shortly after that, Kyron comes up missing. It's just,
Yep.
and you're connecting those three people. You're connecting the
Exactly.
three. Like that's
Very
a huge connection.
exactly. Just so, if nothing else, just add it to the coincident pile that's just piling up against them. The red flag coincidences.
Miss
um,
Death by Chocolates here. Thank you for being here, hun. I love
yes.
seeing you here.
Yes.
So Frink or Frink, you decide. Is that right? Frink or Fink? I don't know.
Yes. Yes. I think they're playing on the DA. His name was something Frink or something. Yeah. Norman Frink. I
So
think they're
how
just
does a cat? So how does a casual friend such as Dede Spicer become elevated to Terri Horman's lifeline to the outside world, only to turn into the number two suspect in the de facto criminal investigation of Terri Horman? So I actually have here the meaning of de facto because I had to get a hold of Kalia and be like, what is de facto? Explain it to me. And so it's up here. It's de facto action is an action taken without strict legal authority to do so, but recognized as any or as legally valid nonetheless. The action is considered something that acquires valid, what is that? Validity?
validity.
Validity. There we
Validity.
go.
Yep.
Based on the fact that it's exists. Sorry, I have to get this one off here. It existence and tradition. Last update. Oh, who
Yep.
cares about the update? So, can you explain to us what this de facto is?
Yes, it basically just means that although that Terri is not officially a suspect, she's never been named a suspect as from the police. Um she still is the suspect de facto. She's just not officially recognized as it because the police have never named her as such. But we know she is the suspect because of certain other legal validity
Right.
concerns. Like, for instance, the fact that the DAs didn't want to be questioned at all through the divorce hearing. You know, the fact that Terry's was trying to get information on what the DAs were telling Kane and stuff, and they were saying no, we can't because this investigation is revolving Terri Horman. They weren't calling her a suspect, but afterwards, when they said Terri Horman is the suspect de facto, that is the truth. We all know that
Right.
she is the suspect. The police don't have to say it. We know it.
Okay. Thank you for explaining that.
Mm-hmm.
So, Norman W. Frink, a longtime chief deputy district attorney for Multnomah County, was former district attorney Mike Schrunk's right hand man. While no longer in office and the DA assignments to Kyron's investigations are new, there are strong reverberations from the previous administration. Stoy, you mentioned that law enforcement accused you of wasting their resources and distracting the investigation, and what we did, or in what they did, they mean, or how did they explain that to you? Spicer, first it was Chief ADA Norm Frink who said I was wasting their time and resources by not cooperating, by which he meant take their polygraph. That was just a couple of days before news first broke out about my involvement and was all part of his blackmailing me. Stoy, how do you mean blackmailing you? The DA, Frink? Spicer, yes. We were in a meeting interview and was your attorney present? Stoy interrupts. Spicer, yes, sitting right there. Frank, said that we do not think you had anything to do with this, but we do think you have information about Terri Horman's involvement, and we do think she is involved. Either you take a polygraph or provide the information we believe you have, or I don't care. We will tell the family that we do think that you're involved.
And the next line down, Stoy asks, "What was your response?" And my note is, what was your attorney's response? You said your attorney is
Right.
sitting right there, and he's not protecting you. He's not saying we're leaving. He is not saying you can't ask my client that or anything. Like, he's just letting you be blackmailed. You have either the worst
Right.
attorney ever, or this didn't happen the way you're saying it happened. Because I mean, I don't know how many other of our watchers watch other true crime things, but like, that is not what a criminal defense attorney behaves like, especially when they're sitting in with you to an agreed interrogation.
And
And
not the largest criminal investigation in Oregon's history, or the largest
right,
missing child or missing persons case in all of Oregon. Come on. Like, this
exactly.
attorney needs to be saying something. And if what she's saying is true, he straight up was blackmailing her. You get your client, you walk the frig out. Like, that's what
Yeah,
you're going to do.
right.
And if
And
my attorney wouldn't have, I would have got up and left without him, and my ass would have went and got another attorney.
right, I can't believe that that's what she's saying, how her attorney behaved, because that is so abnormal for any investigation, especially when you're represented by an attorney. And I would also just like to point out that when Terri gave her interviews in 2016, she said that the police told her if she got an attorney, they couldn't talk to her anymore. Yet Dede's over here sitting in interviews with her attorney, and they're blackmailing her. It's like, I just don't know, like, what the frick? I just make it make sense.
Yeah, right? So Stoy says, "What was your response?" And Spicer says, "I said that I understood the need for them to do what they had to do, but that I was not going to tell them something that was not true. I did not really expect them to say anything they knew to be false. They did. The next day, my name was released to the press by Desiree Young and Kane Horman, or released to the press by Desiree Young and Kane Horman. It was a statement about me not cooperating, and I think advising others not to, or words to that effect." And their I don't have their statement. And then Stoy goes on to say, "I am not sure I even know how to respond to that, or if I should during the interview. For me, that is a tantamount to telling you that we're looking at facing an indictment of your own." Is that what that's saying? An indictment?
Yeah,
"I think a reasonable conclusion by someone in your position would have been that you could expect to be arrested for something they knew you did or not, regardless of what it was, to further a case that they seemingly had no evidence in. Again, I find you courageous to have ever had another meeting with any other law enforcement officer or DA in this case. I think I would have been very, very easy to say, F this, they are not going to find Kyron with anything I have to offer because I do not know anything, and they are not going to find him by putting words in my mouth against anyone else. I need to protect myself. You never did that. Courageous." Spicer, "Thank you. But I really don't feel courageous. I mean, courage is when one does something for which they have a great deal of fear. Mostly, I haven't been afraid, which is what pissed law enforcement off from the very beginning." And I highlighted this. She hasn't been afraid because through this interview, after she says, "I'm not afraid," she starts talking about how afraid she is.
yeah.
But she wasn't afraid, and it pissed off law enforcement.
Right. Yep. Can't make it keep her story straight.
Yeah. "The one time I was afraid," and then she goes on, "the one time I was afraid was after the ADA tried to blackmail me, and I began to realize I might have to live in a world where the truth didn't matter. I was not courageous at all for facing that fear." Stoy, I am not an attorney, but based on what you are telling me, I don't see how that is construed as anything but blackmail. He literally gave you two,
Unilaterally.
what?
That's
Unilaterally
Yep.
gave you two choices, both of which were in contradiction to your Fifth Amendment rights, considering he was ready to make a public criminal allegation about you, does not matter to whom it was. On the following day, June 22nd, 2010, Norm Fink made a good on his threat to Dede Spicher. From the Oregonian, from Maxine Bernstein, in a statement late tonight, Kyron Horman and Kyron's mother, Desiree Young, and Desiree's husband, Tony Young, said they had been briefed by law enforcement and believe Spicer is hampering the investigation. They employed her to cooperate. She has not only been in close communication with Terri, but has been providing Terri with support and advice that is not in the best interest of our son, the statement said. Additional information provided shows that she is refusing to cooperate with law enforcement. She is also going as far as to suggest to others that may have information regarding Kyron's disappearance not to cooperate as well. In one fell swoop, Dede Spicher was the Richard Jewell of Portland, courtesy of Norm Fink. Like,
So
come on, let's just drama. How bad can Christina Stoy dramatize this situation?
yeah. And it's funny when she's giving her pats on the back for being so courageous. Um Part of this here, she says that, Dede said that she might have to, or actually it's Christina's story, she writes this, F this, they're not going to find Kyron with anything I have to offer because I do not know anything, and they're not going to find him by putting words in my mouth against anyone else. That's what Christina Stoy said she would have done if she was in Dede Spicer's shoes. However, if you think about it, whether Dede Spicer was involved or not, she really does not know if Terri was or not. And she spent 11 days privately with Terri, where Terri seemingly was confiding in her. The least she could do is tell her everything that Terri freaking was saying at that time. You know what I mean? Because what if Terri was accidentally dropping little hints here and there about stuff, and like, even let's just say Dede was innocent, she still was with her during that time where she was like really, she was quiet, she got her lawyer and all that. So instead of helping the investigation, she still is over here protecting Terri. It just doesn't make sense to me at all.
And just to point out once again, because you're talking about attorneys, don't forget, everyone, Dede Spicer was one of the only friends, or the only friend of Terry's that was talked to that ever got an attorney, even
Yep.
though other friends of hers had their houses searched just like Dede, talked to them, interrogated them, went before the grand jury.
Right.
She's the only one. She is the only one. And she was the only one basically seeking counsel in the very beginning when she's talking to lawyers from her condominium.
Right. Yep. Exactly. Like test in the water type stuff in that very
Yeah.
beginning. Do you want me to read the next section? We can
If you
trade
want.
off.
Yeah.
All right, cool. Nothing grand about the grand jury. Dede Spicer was called before the first grand jury in July 2010. She was never asked any questions. I asked her if she had any information on that grand jury's status and whether or not a true bill was sought and denied, suspended, or dismissed. Interesting point. Even Christina Stoy is over here wondering if that grand jury was an investigative tool or were they actually seeking charges. So we don't
And we've
know.
talked about that before, because we think, you and I think, in our own opinions, that this grand jury was used to collect evidence. They're being
Yes.
used as a tool to be able to subpoena people to court, to start
Yep.
asking everybody questions, to build a case against Terri. Because in 2017, they're in a secret grand jury and they're asking, law enforcement to go search Sauvie Island again. Like, that's the
Exactly.
kind of things that they can do. They're being used as a tool here, in my opinion.
And they're
That's how I
completely in
feel.
secret. Those search warrants and subpoenas and stuff are all done in secret. That's what gives the investigators an edge over the investigation by using that secret grand jury system. So just wanted to point that out, that even Christina Stoy is here wondering and totally acknowledging, in my opinion, that this grand jury could have been just an investigative tool. They might not have been searching or seeking charges.
And she did this interview just 2 or 3 months after she testified for 5.5 hours in front of the grand jury.
Yep, exactly. Spicer says, I don't know any of that. She doesn't know if they were seeking a true bill or not. But I believe that there was an election year and that it was all a DA strategy. I think that they called me to scare Terri Horman and maybe Rudy Sanchez. Stoy, why do you say Rudy Sanchez? He testified as well, so that has a layer of at least limited use immunity. For all that we know, he had a separate agreement for what is called transactional immunity. I have no information on that, though. He has never responded to my request for an interview. Spicer, I don't know. I just know that this is who Terri felt was involved. His name never came up until Terri was asked who had been on the property that was not a friend or a relative. I
I
think that's
just put up
interesting.
here, yeah, I just put up here what transactional um, immunity is. Can you read that, Kaylia, on there? And
Yes,
kind of let us all know what it is?
the difference between transactional and use immunity is that transactional immunity protects the witness from prosecution for the offense or offenses involved, whereas the immunity only protects the witness against the government's use of his or her immunized testimony in a prosecution of a witness. So yeah, basically, if he was involved, it protects him from being involved. If he gave his testimony, I guess. Yeah. I find it interesting that Spicer's over here saying Terri was pointing the finger at Rudy Sanchez when I don't think she said that in any of her 3 interviews. Yes,
Actually, she did.
she did
She
accuse
did
him.
she mentions him when law enforcement asks her about if there was anybody else, a stranger coming to the house recently,
Yes.
and she mentions Rudy Sanchez as the landscaper that's been coming to the house. But the thing is he was hired in fall of 2009. I mean, he'd been there over a year already.
And then also when Dr. Phil straight up asks her, "What do you think happened?" she says she thought it was the dude at 7-Eleven,
Yep.
not
Well,
Rudy
that's her
Sanchez.
controlling the narrative again.
Yeah.
She kind of put it out there, a few, I don't know, her own ideas or whatever, because I think she was just trying to get the focus off of her.
Yeah, me too. Just look anywhere else but me.
Yep.
Dede was again subpoenaed to appear before the grand jury on July 10th, 2013. She felt that it was her impression that law enforcement and the DA were running out of time due to the civil suit and the divorce case. And she read that the grand jury was extended for 6 months previously and about to expire. At the time, the civil case Desiree Young filed against Terri Horman and has since been withdrawn, was about to resume. A stay had been granted in November 2012, a month before a scheduled hearing to compel further deposition of Spicer in that matter. So it sounds like they might have wanted her to do another deposition because her first deposition was in October 2012, and then this is saying that a stay had been granted, meaning that they put a pause on the civil case in November 2012, a month before a scheduled hearing to compel further deposition. So yeah, it sounds like they were going to try to get her to
Oh,
talk
wow.
more. I didn't
I
really
didn't notice that when I
yeah.
went through this.
Yep, I didn't either until I just read that out loud, but that's what that means. Yeah.
But I
Um
mean, if she's already, she's pleading the fifth to 142 questions, I'm assuming that even if she would have got a deposition, the majority of it still would have been pleading the fifth.
I'm sure. Yeah. Dede assumed that what she did not know might potentially help the investigation by potentially shifting the focus away from red herrings as to her knowledge of events. The problem now for Spicer was that the prosecutor had already demonstrated to her that it was not above using almost any means or tactics, and at the time she had concerns that even her own lawyer believed she was telling the truth. Stavely advised her to tell the truth, tell everything she knew, and she did repeatedly. Stoy. So you get a subpoena once again to appear before the grand jury. Detectives are telling you to your face that they don't believe you. The prosecutor, Frink, has demonstrated that he does not believe you. According to what you have shared with me so far, you question if your own attorney believes you. How lonely of a place is that? I think most people would have been completely terrified. How do you cope with the fear? Spicer. You know, I was terrified. It seemed like every time law enforcement would ask me for something, I would provide it, and it was like a new, fresh hell each time. It was not going away. I could not even read about the case or discuss it with anyone other than my parents because it was absolutely clear to me that the public now believed I was the obstacle to either solving the case or arresting Terri to solve the case and or finding Kyron, and I knew that to be false. The truth did not matter to anyone. I was told so often I began to even question myself. I won't forget a conversation I had with a detective about whether or not I was unconsciously suppressing information I did not know I had. I mean, imagine my response to that. I said, well, if I'm suppressing something, then I think that means I have to wait for it to enter my conscious by way of my subconscious. And if and when it does, I would certainly let you know.
Well,
So,
and like right there she is playing games again with her words and not taking things serious. And then up above, you have her saying that she was terrified. And I pointed out earlier, she said she wasn't scared. Here she is using the word terrified. And then even up above that, she's saying, and Stoy says, and according to what you have shared with me so far, you question if your own attorney believes you. Once again, here's her attorney. And I would have done fired him by now. I'm sorry. He's
yeah,
letting them blackmail me, and I don't even feel like my own attorney believes me. Screw that.
you're
Not
paying
in a
them a lot of
child
money,
missing.
you
Yeah,
know?
not in a missing child's case either. Like
No,
because if shit hits the fan, my ass is in trouble here, and I
exactly.
need to know that my attorney is backing me up.
Right. Yep. So Stoy asks, are they suggesting hypnosis? Spicer says, no, although I'm not sure I would not have preferred that. My attorney had advised against taking a polygraph. I believed Terri back in June 2010 when she said she was telling the truth, and they told her that the lie detector test was saying she was lying. And I also knew that even if I agreed to it, that law enforcement was under no obligation to tell me if I passed or failed. And even if they did tell me that I could trust that information to be correct. For me, it was not going to be an end to this because I knew that I had been telling the truth and that was not what anyone wanted to hear. So, what was verifying that going to get me? It was more like the potential beginning of a fresh new hell. It's funny because she says what would verifying that, what was it going to get me? Yet that is exactly why she's in this interview. She took a polygraph, she says she passed, and she cleared herself. So I just don't understand why she's over here saying, why would I do that to myself, when that's exactly what she ended up doing, and that's how she quote
Her,
unquote cleared herself. It just doesn't make sense. Like,
yeah, and she contradicts herself so many times. It's like this, she is again, and then I mean they're sitting here talking about what did he say or what did Stoy say? Something about hypnosis. It's like they're making jokes, like they're gonna actually hypnotize her or something. Like it,
yeah.
you don't act like that when you're talking about a missing child. You just don't. I want to address something I just seen here in the comments. It's said by Deb Brooks. So when I Google West Wind Farm Studio, it shows me that they are located on Sauvie Island. When did they move there? And is this just a coincidence? That's where Terry's phone pinged, right? West Wind Farms is not on Sauvie Island. It is off of Old Germantown Road. I do not believe that it has moved. I just recently went to the farm. Um, Terry's phone did not ping on Sauvie Island. Sauvie Island itself does not have a cell phone tower. The cell phone tower is located on Highway 30, about 2.5 miles west of the Sauvie Island Bridge. So if I am wrong, I am going to have to look this up. I will be looking up whether or not Sauvie Island has West Wind Farm on there. Maybe they have like, I don't know, maybe they sell like some of their lavender there, or maybe their flower pots. They may have like a little small business, but the big farm itself, I know for a fact, is up on Old Germantown Road, unless they sold the property, because I do know sometime a while ago there was talk of that place being sold.
She did.
So this is something we need to look into.
I actually know. So Miss Hawkinsmith is no longer the owner of the property. She did sell it, but this is like a historical property. It is like the architect. They know who the architect is of the original owner and all that. So I believe that it might not be referred to as Westwood Farms anymore in the last like couple years. But I don't know if I've never heard of a Westwood Farm on Sauvie Island, and if there is, I think it might be just an unrelated coincidence.
Yeah, and the full name is West Wind Farm Studios for that property. So
I do know, though, it's not uncommon. I went to a pumpkin patch yesterday, and this pumpkin patch happens to be in Boring, Oregon, and we were laughing because they were unloading pumpkins on pallets and we were laughing because and when we asked them, they don't grow their pumpkins there. This was like their flower this is where they grow their flowers, so they had the sunflowers and dahlias and stuff, and then they grow their pumpkins on a patch, and their apples and their produce on a big farm like a couple miles up the road. So they actually do bring them in by pallets from one farm.
Oh my gosh, that's funny.
Yes. So, who knows? It's just, it could be, who knows? Just funny stuff like that. All right, so let's see, where was I? Dede. Yes, yep. Here we go. Dede absolutely believed that her impending grand jury appearance was designed to result in her facing some sort of charge for something that investigators believe would lead her to ultimately implicate Terri Horman in Kyron's disappearance. In fact, she was told that what was an honest tax mistake error on her part after she ended up being paid a nominal amount by Miss Hawkinsmith but never received a 1099 could end up placing her in hot water. The Capone tactic for a woman that took the job with the understanding that it was not a paid endeavor, and when Miss Hawkinsmith told Spicer she wanted to compensate her, she declined, but Hawkinsmith insisted. On this basis, Dede was advised to and agreed to an immunity deal, the terms of which are under seal, and Spicer nixed discussing citing a verbal agreement she made until such time as it is unsealed. So again, that just it contradicts itself. For the first paragraph I read is saying that she was told that what was an honest tax mistake could get her in hot water. And then the next paragraph says, on this basis, she was advised to and agreed to an immunity deal. But the details are basically she can't talk about them. That doesn't make sense to me. She sounds to me like she just talked about it right then and there.
Right. And the fact that, she may not have gotten a 1099 and she may have been on unemployment. But at the point where Miss Hawkinsmith, after Dede declines to take any money from her, and Miss Hawkinsmith's, saying, no, I'm going to give it to you, and she takes it and she cashes it, it's her obligation at that point in time to turn that money into unemployment, which she could have done even without a 1099. We're sitting here talking about taxes right here, when actually everybody talks about it being unemployment fraud and the reason why she got immunity. And it just doesn't make any sense.
I really do wonder how much it would have to be, because it sounds to me like Miss Hawkinsmith is insisting, like almost like it could be a gift. And if I know, I know that it was only recently that the government started wanting us to report any gifts over $600. So how much did Miss Hawkinsmith give her? Is it really, it sounds far-fetched to me. And not, second of all, why would she then go and incriminate herself? After all this time, she hasn't wanted to incriminate herself, and then she gets a deal over an employment fraud, and now she'll go incriminate herself. That doesn't make any
Because in her
sense.
deposition in 2012, they started asking her questions about working for Miss Hawkinsmith and if Miss Hawkinsmith ever paid her. And she actually talks about that in the deposition and receiving money and everything. So then when she goes forward, now she's afraid she's going to get in trouble. But the thing is this is like, are you going to get in trouble after that long? But in the same sense,
No.
it kind of here is just kind of like, if you got the money for working and you got it, it was her obligation to turn it into unemployment anyway. And she should face charges for that if she's not doing what she's supposed to be doing. Everybody
Right.
else that's on unemployment is supposed to be turning this shit in. Why isn't she doing it?
Right. And would they even make her go to jail? I don't know. I think what they probably would do is adjust her taxes, force a 1099, because they can do that, and then make her pay the money back. And that she wouldn't go to jail.
Exactly.
She would just be in debt and have to pay it back. And her
Right.
taxes would be offset until that's paid back. I can't see it being, unless Miss Hawkinsmith's over here giving her like $15,000 and she's evading a big amount of taxes. Otherwise, I just really can't it doesn't make sense to me. I can't see it happening. I just
And
personally
is
think
she
it's
in this
far-fetched.
interview? Yeah, and in this interview, is she just trying to avoid it, saying that that's what the immunity for, because that's what she wants people to believe? That
Yeah.
is for unemployment for? That's what she wants everyone to believe, because maybe she doesn't want Terri, her little friend, to know, hey, dude, I threw your ass under the bus.
Yeah, exactly. All right. Continuing, it says a source inside the investigation who does not wish to be identified as they are not authorized to speak publicly on the case has confirmed that Spicer's agreement includes provisions that she continue to cooperate with law enforcement as needed, be available to testify in any proceedings, and to take a polygraph. We shared in our last live that Desiree says that Dede's immunity has been revoked because she was not holding up her end of the deal. Just wanted to throw that out there.
But then again, Stacey Green goes on there after she says
Yes.
that on her Facebook and says that
You're
Dede
right.
Spicher does have an immunity.
That she has super immunity, that it was some kind of, that he accidentally gave her some kind of immunity that didn't have these contingencies.
Yeah, what the hell is accidental immunity? Can someone explain that to me, please?
Yes.
We have Justine Carter here. She's like, I am so excited. This is live. I have questions. Laugh out loud. We all got questions, and start asking questions. We're both keeping an eye. While I'm reading, she's looking. While she's reading, I'm looking. So go for it. Like, ask us questions. That's what we're here for.
Spicer declined to say whom she committed to not discuss the agreement, but it also included neither party discussing that she had testified before the grand jury. It would appear that Miss Spicer is the only one keeping up her end of the bargain, as Attorney Rosenthal announced publicly that Dede Spicer had testified, a fact to this day she has no idea how he came by that information. So again, it's contradicting. Dede Spicer is saying that neither party can discuss that she had testified before the grand jury, yet here she is
She's telling everybody
yes.
2-3 months afterwards, I just went to the grand jury and I did for 5 hours and I got immunity, and guess what else? I passed a polygraph.
Yep. So it's like, I just don't understand. Is the agreement off or what? Because I hear you just blabbing your mouth about it over and over when you're saying you can't.
And I'm cleared unofficially.
Yeah. Okay. Spicer appeared before the grand jury for 5.5 hours on July 10th, 2013. Because grand jury proceedings are secret and the DA, grand jurors, and state court personnel are barred from discussing the going-ons, the only person who can can speak to a witness's testimony is the witness themselves. In this case, the grand jury witness is Dede Spicer. Stoy. So before we get into the particulars, could you sum up those hours in the room at all? Would you compare it to the civil deposition you endured by Desiree Young's attorney, Mr. Rosenthal? Spicier laughs. No, it was far more comprehensive. I'm referring to the civil deposition. So again, here it is. She writes laughs. So it's a
Yep.
it's is it in person? Is it written? I don't know. But she's laughing, saying that the deposition was far more comprehensive, but yet she testified for 5.5 hours. That's a long time. And I have testified to a grand jury about a crime that I was a witness to. I had somebody he broke into my car, and the same night he actually broke into a car dealership in my city and stole a bunch of iPads and keys to their cars and stuff like that. And he ended up in the hospital. And I had to testify along with the representative from the car dealership about what happened. And so I wasn't in there for 5.5 hours by any means. I was probably in there for like 10 minutes, 15 minutes, but they were asking me questions that entire time. It wasn't like I
Right.
was just sitting there and we were just
Mm-hmm.
awkwardly quiet. They were taking notes and asking me questions and expanding on what I wanted to say. Asked me, is there anything I wanted to tell them? Stuff like that. So 5.5 hours is a comprehensive testimony. I just
That's
find that
huge.
funny that she's over here laughing like, oh, it was not a big deal. But maybe it wasn't. I wasn't there. Stoy, when asked about your weight, you are far more reserved and eloquent than I would have been. If someone would have asked me my weight at a deposition, I would have said I did not know, and I would be glad to sit on him and let him guess. Spicer says, I know, right? Not me. I am direct. I had nothing to hide, and I was not intimidated in the least. Stoy, so without telling me any questions you were asked specifically, what would you characterize as your testimony? Spicer, they were obsessed with my sexuality. Was I a lesbian? What were my thoughts on homosexuals? Did I ever have a threesome with anyone, with Kane and Terri, etc.? I was thinking if I were a juror, I would be like, what does this have to do with anything? I answered every question respectfully and honestly, but my takeaway is that some folks still have a hard time believing that I would rush to a friend's aid if we had not been in contact or particularly close in the first place. I responded that when your friend texts, I need you now, I got in my car and headed over there. There was never a question in my mind, even if I knew that everything that happened to me over the last 3 years would happen all over again. I would do the same thing today. That's what friends do. I also testified when it was clear that sentiment was not shared by some, that I certainly was hopeful that they never needed a friend immediately. Again, so she's saying Terri said, text her that I need you now, but then earlier says that it was Terry's parents that asked her to come stay with Terri. So
Right.
this,
In People's Magazine interview, that's what she said. The reason that
yes.
she went over there. And then, talking about her sexuality and everything else, and her saying, well, if I was a juror, you know what? The reason that they're talking about their sexuality is because there has been,
They're
talk
establishing like a
about whether,
motive. Yeah, or like a
yeah,
connection or some sort of like reason, I guess. Maybe not a motive, but establishing the backstory of why they are saying this happened. This is relevant to it.
right, because there's been lots of speculation of the fact that Dede could have been in love with Terry or that they were having some kind of relationship. And if anybody watches Desiree Young or Stacey Green on World Soldiers, you will see them constantly talk about Terry and Dede being lovers.
Yep. hmm And I mean, I believe what Desiree says. And if there's evidence of that, then I definitely believe that. There's never been evidence released of that. However, we know that she was sexting Michael Cook, um, which I can't remember it. Do you know this, Samantha? Did Michael Cook say he was wanting to text Terri because he was hoping to get information from her?
No, but Terry said that she thought that that's why Michael
Ah,
Cook was
okay.
trying
Got it.
to talk to her, was to get information. And yeah, you got two girls together, Dede and Terry, in a house for 11 days, acting like some big slumber party, sexting Michael Cook in their tank tops and their underwear, eating cookies.
Yep.
Like this is like not even 30 days after Kyron comes up missing, and they're acting like there's a freaking slumber party.
And we never get to see the text, but Kane's attorney says that the police told him or showed them sex similar to the sex with Michael Cook between Terri and Rudolfo Sanchez, the landscaper that she allegedly asked to murder Kane for her. So basically, the thought process or the theory behind all this is that Terri uses sex as a way to try to manipulate people. And
Right.
Dede might have been one of those people as well. And what I find interesting here is Spicer says they were obsessed with my sexuality. Did I ever have a threesome with anyone, with Kane and Terri, etc.? I wonder if they asked her if they ever had a threesome with Rudy and Terri because there was sex between, allegedly sex between Terri
Well,
and
they
Rudy.
also know, where they probably knew because of the letter that came out, Jason Wishart's letter that came out about Dede, her ex-boyfriend. She's like in her early 40s, and he was her very first boyfriend. So, I mean, there may be already trying to piece together her sexuality just based off of that. Like, your first boyfriend's in your early 40s, and you told him that you're the last man I'm ever going to be with. And to this day, I've never seen or heard of her being in a relationship. And considering that Stacey Green has her spies looking at Dede and Terri all the time, I think we would know if she was seeing somebody, honestly.
Yeah, right? I know. Seriously. I totally think so too. She would be sharing that for sure.
Right?
Okay, the interview continues. Because of travel time, Spicer requested that since investigators wanted to give her the polygraph in Portland, that they schedule it for the day after the grand jury. It was easier for her to extend her time in Portland than have to return again, and they agreed. Upon arrival, although Spicer was prepared for and extended her visit to take the polygraph as committed, she was told that they had decided that because she was on the stand for such a grueling afternoon the day before, that they never want to give someone a polygraph after such an experience, as it might skew the results. She made a mental note that they had told her previously that one's emotional state and exhaustion level are taken into consideration in a polygraph. In other words, while investigators were telling her Terri Horman previously failed her polygraphs, she asked them if that could have been due to the fact that she went through hours and hours of interviews just prior to the exams, and investigators now had a different story. I can see that. I mean, I could definitely see that them doing it both ways. I mean, who knows? I do believe that your emotional state can play into the polygraph, but also you have to remember that Terri failed her polygraph on Monday after Kyron disappeared. He disappeared Friday. So she
And
took
she
her.
failed two.
Yes,
And she walked out on one. And then she
and
lied and said she had a hearing problem.
the timing also makes a big difference in my opinion,
Right.
because so she took that first polygraph on on June whatever on that Monday
7th.
and failed, and then came home, was pissed, told everybody she was done cooperating. This is Monday, the Monday after
Right.
Kyron disappeared, and then did not go back to take the second polygraph for 10 days. And when she went back, that's when she walked out because she's like, you know what, screw this. I'm not going to set myself up for this again. And then the family did an intervention on her and said, please, you have to do this. And she finally went in for that third attempt. And it was over 10 days between the first failed polygraph and the third attempt. That's a
Yeah, because
long
if you're not
time.
guilty, you're going to go and you're
No,
going to do everything
yes,
you can to just, okay, I'm going to do everything I have to do for law enforcement. Ask me anything. I'll do anything. Clear me. Move on. That's what you want because you want Kyron found.
exactly. Kyron disappears the 4th. Terri fails a polygraph on the 7th and is so pissed about it. She says she's done in cooperating. And from
And
that
on the
point
5th,
on, is
the day
doing
after,
nothing.
yeah, and on the 5th, the day after Kyron comes up missing, she's already making, emails and everything are in the news. June 5th. the day
Yeah.
after.
Yep.
She's already controlling the
Controlling the
narrative
narrative.
then.
Yep.
Talking about his coat and jacket being up at the school, which everybody, we're going to be doing a live on the whole controlling the narrative thing because there are too many. There are too
Yes.
many. She tries so hard to control shit.
Yes.
Heron Hamster Wheel. Mark Heron and Keith Karev begin the interview the same exact way they had for years, which was how you highlighted that. Why'd you highlight that?
I highlighted that again because, again, it has that Mark Heron detective, and I was doing research on him, and I mean, he was awarded for his river patrol stuff. So I just don't know why he would be the one leading the investigation when you just don't. I mean, I don't know. I've never heard his name associated with Kyron elsewhere, so I just highlighted it because I wanted to do more research on that.
I still kind of want to do more research on that because it's just really interesting. I just know from something that I read a while back ago that the officers at Multnomah County Sheriff Office, if it's correct, what I read, they'll be in like homicide one day and then they're like at their desk the next day and then they're looking and searching for people on the river the next. So I mean, like, is this just part of him bouncing around? But I mean, if he was doing river patrol for a long period of time, it looks like he may not have been one of the officers like jumping around. But anyway, it says we still can't seem to put together the right timeline from when you were at the property. And on again it went. Spicer continued the interview as she had agreed to, but informed them that if this was her time use, that to perform the polygraph, they would need to travel to Klamath Falls on their own dime. They did just that. Dede Spicer passed a polygraph administered by the same Gresham Sheriff's deputy who administered the polygraph exam to Terri Horman. Spicer says, in particular, Mark Heron was jubilant. She said it was like a party atmosphere. Spicer was virulent. I don't even know what that word means, but whatever. Well, I am happy that you are happy, I guess. But the thing is, I have been telling you the same thing for 3 years, so I guess I am just happy you're happy. Harry went on to blame Spicer for the thousands of hours and dollars that her refusal to take a polygraph cost the investigation. Then they asked to speak to Spicer's attorney privately outside of her presence. She agreed. After a few minutes, they called Spicer back and asked for her permission to meet with her privately without her attorney. Spicer and her attorney agreed. Karev starts by telling her, "We are so glad you are on the team finally. This is such a big step in this case, and you are really one of us." Why? Just why?
Yeah,
I mean, like,
that just contradicts what she says. She has so many contradictions in this first part that you wrote. She says in one of these paragraphs that Mark Heron was jubilant. It was like a party atmosphere. And then she says, but then Heron went on to blame Spicer for the thousands of hours and dollars that the refusal to take the polygraph cost the investigation. But then the other investigators start saying, "We are so glad you're on the team. This is such a big step." It's like, what the heck is going on here?
right, if you were a football player, I'm going to smack you on the ass as you walk in the office. Like, what the hell?
What is going?
It's
I just really don't get it. It just so it doesn't make sense. I
well, and
cannot
then
pick
if
this.
you're asked to be spoken to without your attorney, red flag right there. Boom.
Oh
Once
yeah,
again, here's her attorney not saying a damn thing, like, excuse me. And then they want to talk to him without Spicer too. Like, it just doesn't,
that is
it does
no.
not make sense.
And then again, Terry's over here saying that they're telling her, if you get an attorney, we can't even talk to you. And now they're over here playing games. There's no way you can tell me that the police asked them this and that the attorney said yes. I really do not
Right.
believe that for 1 second, because that is what the attorney is there for. They would say, no, yeah, I am not going to let you speak to my client without me. That is
Right.
exactly why I'm here for. I'm here
Yep.
for their best interest, not yours.
And then
Yeah.
just as you continue, that this is where it all comes into, where it's just so far-fetched to me as somebody who
Right.
watches interrogations and listens to a lot of documentaries about how investigations are ran. These next couple paragraphs, putting yourself in those shoes, it sounds so far-fetched to me that I
Yeah,
just
it
don't
does.
think
It
will
sounds
happen.
really ridiculous. Really ridiculous. And it says, then the hook. We asked to speak to you without your attorney because we would like you to participate in a sting against Terri. We can't ask you in front of your counsel, and you cannot tell him what we said because he will then be obligated to make some calls as a member of the bar and all of that. Which, not only are you asking her to come in without her attorney, but now you're telling her we're talking to you and you can't tell your attorney. Spicer asks if she can at least discuss it with her dad, a retired deputy with Klamath Falls Sheriff's Office. Herron said she could, but that he couldn't discuss it with her attorney either. Spicer told them it was 10 p.m. and reminded them that she had not had any contact with Terri since July 2010. Spicer told investigators that she was not comfortable with the proposal and would definitely need to sleep on it. They told her they would follow up with her. Stavley, presumably uncomfortable with law enforcement's request to meet with his client without him, asked Spicer to tell him what the meeting was about. She told her attorney. So they're asking her not to tell him because for whatever reason he's going to have to tell the bar, it can mess something up, and she does anyway. So even if this all does happen, and she is trying to be helpful, and she is trying to help Kyron in whatever way, and they ask her not to tell her attorney, she ends up doing it anyway, which I probably would too. I'm
I
just going
would
to
have,
say,
yep,
I
if
would
I
have
were her, what
immediately.
she's saying is true, I would definitely would have told my attorney too, but I just can't see her attorney even have agreeing to that in the first place. That
Yeah,
is, first of all, police already tell you if you go into an interrogation and you say you want an attorney, they stop their question there and then. There
yep,
and then. They don't try to say, okay, well, can I just ask you a couple without your attorney? No. They know. They know. They cannot do that. And I can't
yeah.
believe that she's even saying that they did. That just sounds so far-fetched to me.
Right. And okay, so she told her attorney and that it was something they told her she could not tell him and that she wanted to get out of there and discuss it later. Stavley said he was not at all comfortable with that arrangement. And within hours, Spicer told him that law enforcement wanted her to participate in a sting operation. It was not until last week that Detective Karev contacted Spicer directly to follow up on the request for Dede Spicher to participate in a what's that word?
Surreptitiously, something
Yeah,
like that.
surreptitiously recorded sting where she was to call Terri Horman and at the direction of law enforcement read from a prepared agenda to include coaching by them, and Spicer declined.
If I were Spicer, I would have done this thing just because, I mean, especially if you haven't spoken to Terri since July 2010, you have absolutely nothing to lose. There's no friendship still there, and there's still a missing boy. And second of all, I mean, it doesn't go on to say that her attorney went and had to call any bars. It doesn't say that. I mean, this isn't illegal for the police to ask her to do. So
Right.
why are they asking her to not tell her attorney when her attorney could have just told her yes or no, we either will or won't do that? I mean, that's totally something. I don't think that he would. I mean, it doesn't say why he needed to call the bar, or that he said I'm calling the bar immediately, or anything like that. It just is kind of a weird
Right.
ending.
And, like you mentioned just a second ago, you're talking about how Terri and Dede aren't talking. There was a statement put out by Dede's own attorney that said that Dede and Terri were no longer communicating with each other. And they made it sound like there was one of them put a stop to it or something. The way that he had said it just made it sound like they're just not talking. And
Yeah.
they're not talking. She doesn't want to do a sting. And here she is protecting Terri again instead of helping Kyron.
Yeah. Doing anything to help Kyron. It's all them. It's just them trying to protect each other and their best interests. It's not Kyron. And again, I said this yesterday. He deserves so much better. And that's just me playing devil's advocate, that innocent until proven guilty. Well, these innocent quote unquote people are doing not a lot to help him. So makes me very upset.
Yeah, it's
Do
crazy.
we want to keep going to the second interview?
Well, that's what I was just going to ask you. This is the end and the conclusion of the first part. Do you want to go for? I mean, I'm up for it. It doesn't even matter to me. And if you don't want to, that I'm fine with that too. I mean, I know you've got littles that you got to take care of.
The second one, it seems to go a little faster. It's not as long, especially because once we get into the steroid stuff, we can just talk about that and then end there. But that's a big bulk of it. So I say we just do it.
Yeah, then I'm down. So we're going on to part 2, guys. If you guys have any questions, Tabitha Benvenuti, I'm so sorry. I'm late, Mom. Kinsley would not stop talking, laugh out loud, but I am here. That's my daughter. She just got done traveling up north after dropping her son off in town. Hi, baby. We're moving on to the second part. Tab, you can always go back and listen to the first part if you want, or if you got to get kids to sleep or whatever. Thanks for coming, babe. Yeah, let's move on to the second part. If anybody has any questions, please feel free to ask. I'm going to go ahead and put the interview on up here again. You may not, or you may be able to read it. I don't know. I just like showing that we do have all of this interview. I like for my viewers to know that we have the information that we're talking about, so that you guys don't think we're just talking about lots of BS.
Right. And they're linked.
Can we recap a little bit? Honey, we just went through almost, an hour and 47 minutes of the first part. I will, though, send you the copy of the first part, or like I said, you can go back and listen to the first part in the morning, babe.
If you take your little slider on the screen, you can move it to the beginning and just start there. And it won't be live, but we'll just keep going, and then you can just get caught up too. That's what I normally do when I miss out on the beginning of a live. And
by the way, that slider thing you're talking about, there's a way on YouTube that you're able to do that slider and break it up into little bitty pieces. And since we win everything year by year on the last story, I need to figure out how to do that. Anyway, sorry to everybody.
Yep, adding chapters, that is a really helpful thing. That's true. Okay, part 2. It starts off by saying, in the first part on Blink on Crime's exclusive interview with Dede Spicher, she revealed that after over 3 years of attempting to provide Multnomah County Sheriff's Office, as well as Assistant Deputy Attorney Norman Frink, with the necessary information, they requested to clear her from any suspicion in the circumstances surrounding the disappearance of Skyline second grader Kyron Horman. She has finally been cleared after passing a polygraph as part of her requirement under an immunity deal that has been sealed with the court. Unofficially cleared, that is. I highlighted that statement again. She has been cleared after passing a polygraph as part of her requirement under an immunity deal. We had talked about a few times in part 1 how it says that she can't talk about the deal, the details of her immunity deal, yet here Stoy is saying that it was a requirement under the immunity deal to pass a polygraph. So it's just contradiction. Spicer and her attorney Chad Stavely, who has since refused all local media requests, would very much like the Multnomah County Sheriff's Office and current District Attorney Rod Underhill to clear her officially and publicly. Yeah, I bet you guys do. Spicer is adamant that law enforcement never had any reason to question her statements to them from the beginning, has cooperated fully for over 3 years, and has recently testified before the grand jury to prove that she had nothing to hide. While she would like the public to know that any assertions to the contrary are untrue and sometimes have been offered maliciously. Her desire to speak out about her experience over the last 3 years is primarily to force investigative resources to review its progress and hopefully adjust in a way to further leads in Kyron's case, as was not proven not only by her recent polygraph, but also by verification that no evidence ever existed to support investigators' theory in the first place. Spicer had no information about anyone's potential involvement in Kyron's disappearance, let alone her own. It says, but, you know, as was proven not only with her recent polygraph, but also by the verification that no evidence ever existed to support the theory in the first place. I just find that interesting because we've never seen that verified. And in fact, it sounds like nobody was able to verify she was even there on the farm. People couldn't find her. So
Right, and there's a lot of stuff that's not verified, just like her being cleared is unverified.
Yeah, exactly.
Or unofficially.
The continuation of our interview, which provoked some very interesting revelations long felt to be a possibility by many, was confirmed by Miss Spicer, as she says, told to her by Terri Moulton Horman, are prompting new possible theories in the circumstances surrounding the disappearance of Kyron Horman, 2 days after Kyron Horman's 11th birthday. Stoy, so in your estimation then, why do you think the detectives Heron and Kraft were so sure that you were involved or knew who was? Spicer, I've thought about this a lot, and I think there were a few reasons. I think because I was advised through a meeting Terri had with a family friend and attorney that she would assume that all of her communication was being monitored by law enforcement and anyone she had contact with. He told her to assume the house was bugged, as well as vehicles, etc. I also believe you did an article a while back that pointed out her phone was in Kane's name. As this was a day or two after she was served with the restraining order, she was also told that, Stoy, interrupting, you bought a prepaid phone after June 28th and never had one before that? I had read that you and someone else purchased them the day of or the day after Kyron's disappearance. Spicer, no, I purchased one prepaid phone after Terri shared the info from her meeting in my own name, either June 29th or June 30th. I think they were hung up on the fact that I came to her aid with no contact for so long, so they were just convinced there had to be. Okay, or Stoy says, okay, sorry, continue. So you are not saying that Ellie was suggesting that you were hiding some other number you had, and that was how they were alleging that you had to have been in contact with Terri or some other person prior to the June 4th, and that escalated your person of interest status, in your opinion? Spicer replies, they did not say that to me specifically, but what they repeated over and over again was that Terri and I had to have had some form of communication we were hiding. It never made any sense to me because I knew I only had my cell phone that I had forever until the end of June. And I knew I had not been in contact with Terri since her 40th birthday in March. So I would ask, well, then I guess that means that you don't have any contacts you can't verify from either of us. So why am I even in this interview? I highlighted this as another just strange way of wording it. Well, actually, these are either her written words or her verbal words that she's supposedly saying. And she said, it never made sense to me because I knew I only had my cell phone that I had forever until the end of June. And I knew I had not been in contact with Terri since her 40th birthday in March. So it just is like a very weird way of saying it. Like, it never made sense to me because I knew I had my cell phone, the only cell phone I had for forever. I guess
Right.
if somebody was asking me if I had bought a burner phone, I wouldn't be saying it like that. It just, again, it sounds like you're trying to deflect and like lessen the relevancy of this and like make it like not
Right.
as big of a deal as it's supposed to be.
And you don't even see Stoy like a little bit shocked, like, oh wow, you did? Like, you did buy burner phones? And I mean, talking about the burner phones, Dede said that she bought one. We already know that the other friend of Terry's bought one, and that was two that was purchased the same day with cash under false names. And then the day after, at a different location,
Mm-hmm.
Another 2 burner phones were bought, and the friend of Terry's, not Dede, said that it was under the same fake name and in cash, and she did not purchase them. But here you have Dede saying she only purchased 1. So who the hell purchased the next 2 burner
Right.
phones the next day?
Because yeah, Terri says she never did either. Yeah.
At a different location. And here you have Terry's screenshot that I found, or Facebook post that she posted, that says, I didn't purchase the phones, nor did I tell anyone to do so, and most definitely did not tell anyone to use a fake name. That person did so at their own free time, will based off good intentions and advisement by someone else. And then she said again, there is a whole other aspect to that, but no, I wasn't hiding anything. So here you have her saying that she didn't buy the cell phones the very next day. Dede's only saying that she bought 1. The other friend says they used my fake name, but that wasn't me. So who the hell bought them?
Right. Exactly.
Either
Just strange.
Either you have Terri lying, or you have Dede lying, or you have her friend lying, or there's another person.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And it's my opinion that we have caught some definite changes in stories from Terri. So I take what she says with a grain of salt.
Well, then I also highlighted that it said something about here again, because we kind of touched basis on this, and I couldn't remember where I saw it, and here it is in the Blink on Crime interview, where Terri said she met up with her attorney, and he's telling her the communication was being monitored by law enforcement, and anyone had contact with her, so she's being told pretty much your cars, your house, everything's bugged. This is why they say they want to go get these burner phones so that they can communicate with each other. They're going outside of the house to communicate with each other instead of inside the home because they think that it's bugged. They're using these burner phones, but why would you go get burner phones if you ain't got nothing to hide?
Exactly. It's all just tell me if Letitia Stout went and got a burner phone, we wouldn't be screaming from the streets the same way. Or like Brian Laundrie, or anybody that that the people know. Unfortunately, justice can't be served for XYZ reasons. That's what I compare this to. I don't understand why it's okay that Terri went and got burner phones with Dede and her friends to avoid being heard talking about anything when Kyron is missing. His family is. I just don't understand how people justify that.
And when you're fixing to go on and read, and I'm just going to point this out before you read it, that it talks about Terry's cell phone activity that day, and Dede is the one referencing to it. And my question to that was, how does Dede know about cell phone activity? Law enforcement's not going to tell Dede about Terry's cell phone activity.
Right. Yep. All right, I'll keep it going and we'll get to that. To my recollection, they never shared with me or answered any of my questions in response when something they kept hounding me about seemed absurd and conflicting with their story. Stoy asked, which was. Spicer replies, at first, I think they really believed I was involved, and at some point, I think they were talking more accessory after the fact, because I got the impression, although they did not share it with me, that Terry's cell phone activity that day was nowhere near where I was, and my vehicle never left, nor did I. They would not verify that they located the ceramics, glassware, pottery artisan I told them about, and they still have not. Stoy asks, so in your opinion, you're clearly the linchpin of this case. They, LE, believes you held the key to solving it and or implicating Terri exclusively at that point. They no longer entertained your involvement per se. Spicer said, I honestly don't think I could say that I ever believed that they stopped treating me as some sort of suspect. I never felt that way, but yes, absolutely, they 100% believe that Terri is responsible, and I definitely believe we all had to be interviewed and scrutinized or whatever. But I really thought up until the meeting with Norm Frink that they, LE, would abandon the theory quickly, because if they were positive I was the key and I knew I was not, that would also eliminate Terri, who I did not and do not believe but have no proof was involved or knew anything. So I highlighted this in my personal notes, what she says in this reply. She says, I honestly don't think I could say that I ever believed that they stopped treating me as some sort of suspect. I never felt this way, but yes, they absolutely 100% believe that Terri is responsible. And I definitely believed we all had to be interviewed and scrutinized. Well, why is it that, again, Desiree and her attorney are over here saying that they haven't cooperated? They haven't, that why did she plead the fifth 142 times or whatever on the deposition? But then she tells Stoy that, yes, I do believe we do need to be interviewed and scrutinized or whatever. It's like you're contradicting yourself again. Your actions speak louder than your words. You're not wanting to be interviewed and scrutinized and help clear this.
Right. And she's sticking up for Terri again, too. I mean, just like Bruce McCain said, if she was on West Wind Farms all day long doing what she said that she was doing and never left the farm, how the hell does she know for a fact that Terri Horman had nothing to do with Kyron's disappearance?
Exactly. Yeah.
Why are
why is
they...
she staking everything, her whole social reputation? Why is she staking that on that?
Yeah, and he also says, here you have them acting like they're not friends, but then all of a sudden you have them connected at the hip, and she's staying at her house for 11 days. But they haven't even seen each other since March, and before that it was in December, Christmas time or whatever. So, yeah, do you really run to a friend, an acquaintance that she's just claiming that they're just not really close, but here she is protecting her over and over and over again, and it just doesn't make sense.
Right. I mean, there's no one in my life that I would like. It doesn't matter if the police were coming to me and telling me that we believe that this person, your very, very, very best friend, did this. Of course, I would be shocked. Of course, that would be hard to accept. But like it just acknowledged, Dede and Terri weren't very, very, very best friends. And the police are over here telling her, we 100% believe Terry's responsible for this. We need your help. Can you help us on a sting? Can you do this? And she's over here like, nope, nope, nope. I'm protecting Terri. Sorry.
Oh,
That
and I'm going to go buy
sense.
burner phones so nobody can
Yes.
hear us talk either. I'm going to be your chaperone. I'm going to take her and out running around. I'm going to lie and say her parents sent me over there. But no, Terri actually really called me and told me, I need you. It just
doesn't make any sense.
Mm-mm.
Stoy asks, right, so if you had nothing and they felt you were only the nexus, it had to mean that they had no independent evidence of anything or anyone else, so they would start in another direction. Spicer said, right, but every interaction I had with them following and including the request to participate in the sting against her made me believe that they never did. To get back to the why question you asked me, my final thought on that is that they kept pointing out that I was the person to tell everyone not to speak to them without attorneys in the beginning. I would ask, who do you mean? Because that would have been my opinion across the board for any situation, but it was definitely based on what was getting out about how they were going about this. I was scared, and it turned out to be for good reason. I also would point out to them that I did not think that was or should be the basis for suspicion, because if it was, it seemed to me that I was told that several staff members at Skyline had hired cancel, and Kane was the first to have one between he and Terri, and I had told her at least a week or so before that she should. I would just like
to
point out
here again, we're both going at it. Here again, you have her. I was scared, and it turned out for good reason. When literally in the beginning of her interview, she says, I wasn't scared, and that's why law enforcement was pissed off at me. But she has said scared, terrified. So what was it?
A good couple times. And also she, you know, she's playing whataboutism, which to me is not a good, it's a debate tactic that is not in good faith. You know, you're deflecting off yourself and playing whataboutism. What about Kane's attorney? What about the school's attorney? We're not talking about them right now. We're talking about you and how you were the one who was missing that day, the same day Kyron disappeared, and Terri was also unaccounted for. And I would also just like to point out here where she says Kane was the first to have counsel between he and Terri. That's because he got one the day that he found out she was trying to allegedly hire someone to kill him.
Exactly.
Yeah,
He filed
needed
for
an
divorce and
attorney.
got a
Yes,
restraining order.
he
And
needed
the
one that
same
day.
day, or they move in with each other. Dede goes and stays the same day that he files everything, gets a restraining order, takes the baby from the house. Here comes Dede to come stay.
And
Because Terri
Dede
says, I
doesn't
need you.
know. Dede doesn't know if this is how much evidence they have on this alleged murder for hire plot. Dede has no idea. So again, she's just taking Terry's word for it, or maybe she knows Rudolfo Sanchez and she knew something about this too. Who knows? But why would,
Right.
you know, if I just heard on the news that my friend A may have done something with a child, and then B, now there's evidence that she tried to kill her husband, I'm not running to her defense and defending this woman with my life like Dede is. It's just so bizarre to me.
Right. And like, I'm not going to go stay with her for 11 days because now she's done scared me. I don't want to be
Yeah,
around her for 11 days right now. Like,
right,
she's in a
exactly.
bad state of mind. And what if she wants to hurt me?
Right. Yeah, exactly. I mean, like at this point, instead of being like, "Oh, I'm gonna do anything for my friend," no, I'm gonna be thinking, "I don't know Terri as well as I thought I did." You know, that's
Yeah.
the thoughts that's going in my brain is at that time. So I digress. I'll continue reading. Uh, Stoy, why do you think that she did not immediately take your friendly advice about getting an attorney? Your dad was law enforcement, and I presume she knew that. Oh, sorry, my screen just turned. Oh, there we go. People can say what they want, but I know many members of law enforcement in different jurisdictions and agencies. I have worked with them or contributed analysis to cases with them privately. I cannot and would never include that in anything I choose to write on. And I can tell you that I do not know one of them that if they were the focus of a criminal probe or internal investigation, they absolutely do not agree to an interview without a representative. In fact, Heron is or was the president of Multnomah County Police Union, or was, if I recall correctly. So to that end, I find that a pretty hypocritical reason for suspicion of anyone. I highlighted that again because I was trying to fact check about Heron, and what I did see him, he got some accolades, he's won awards, but from what I can tell, it's always been around search and rescue, and but I will do more. I think I'm going to be doing a deep dive onto what he did. I tried emailing him, but he's since retired. So all this,
Mm-hmm.
I'm just going to have to find the information on the internet myself or newspapers. You know, Stoy finishes this comment by saying, so to that end, I find it pretty hypocritical reason for suspicion of anyone. What she's talking about is hiring an attorney being suspicious. And, you know, I think that's agreeable. Hiring an attorney alone is not suspicious. But it's just, again, I go back to the fact that Terri is over here saying that the police told her, if you get an attorney, we can never work with you again. Yet she's never done anything to cooperate with the investigation since she got her attorney. And then Dede's over here saying that her attorney's doing nothing to protect her. She's getting blackmailed and all this. Just again,
Terri even goes on her Facebook and talks about that, you know, I knew that if I got an attorney, I didn't have to speak about it anymore. And you're fixing to go on and read about, like, she was told by LE that if she did, she wouldn't be privy to any other of their investigation discoveries. She would be out of the loop in finding Kyron. And I highlighted that because she's already online in comment sections of different news not podcasters, but on different news channels and stuff online, you know, typing away and everything else. She was so bound and determined to know every little thing that everybody was talking about her, the case, what they were saying and everything. And I really do feel like she held off on that attorney because they were telling her she wouldn't be privy to any more
Right.
information.
They kind of
inside
knew
scoop.
that was like a soft spot for her. She wanted an upper hand to be able
Yep.
to keep an edge, you know? And that's the same tactic that they used through the divorce. So, and we will go a little bit more into the divorce and custody.
I'm sorry,
at the
I would
end
have
of
got
this.
an attorney the moment I failed a polygraph test. I'm just saying.
Right? Yeah. Spicer, she laughs. Interesting. I'm not sure that I knew that. The reason Terri didn't get an attorney before the restraining order was because she was told by LE that if she did, she wouldn't be privy to any of their investigative discoveries. She would be out of the loop in finding Kyron. Stoy, have you had any desire or opportunity to review any sort of past events regarding the MCSO? I guess I should add that involve anyone in the case or investigation you have had contact with. Spicer replies, no, do you mean like any other detectives or that sort of thing? Stoy says, have you ever met with or been interviewed with any other agencies or detectives? Spicer says, I believe I either met with or just said hello to the guy you mentioned in that recent article of yours while he was at the house. Both Kane and Terri were there at the time as well. Stoy asks, Bobby O'Donnell? Spicer says, yep, that's him. Why did you ask me if I'm aware of any sort of events? Should I be? Stoy says, well, I think that tangentially, I don't know if that's how you say that.
Tangentially.
Thank you. If I were you, I would be considering just about everything as it related to what you have been through. And I'm aware of some what I will refer to as stuff. But what I don't want to do prior to the completion of our interview process is temper any of your responses with anything I know, if that's okay with you. If you wish, once I publish the continuation, which will have that sort of information, I would invite you to comment on it for the record if you choose, if you're okay with that. Spicer says, yes, that's fine and probably a good idea. Stoy said, back briefly to the sting request against Terri. On that issue, the request they extended to you outside the presence of your attorney and that they had asked you not to tell Chad as you think back. Considering you have had no communication with Horman for over 3 years, did you believe that they thought it would work? What did your attorney say when you told him? Spicer, I can't and won't address any conversations I've had with my attorney. But to answer your question as to my opinion, I really don't know for sure. I knew that I did not and thought it was really, really odd. That was my first reaction. After more thought and more conversation, I don't see how they thought it would work or why they were still seemingly convinced after I had just passed the poly, Terri was still their suspect and responsible. What is your opinion on it? Before I read Stoy's opinion on it, I just like to talk about that. She says here, I don't see how they thought it would work or why they are seemingly convinced after I had just passed the poly that Terri was still their suspect and responsible. So again, that's leading me to believe that they're not 100% convinced and they haven't cleared Dede. They're not over here saying that Dede is innocent. If they're still convinced that Terri's involved in some way. And then I also find it funny that she says, I can't and won't address any conversations I've had with my attorney. So she is kind of addressing some conversations.
She's addressed conversations
Yes.
with her attorney through this entire interview.
Yes, but when she's asking for what he said specifically, she says, I can't say that. And I think it's because she knows she can't actually say, my attorney said these words, because then that's like a grounds for some kind of like legal, like a person can lie and on the internet and say something happened when it didn't, but a person can't say another person said this,
Exactly.
like especially an attorney. I think that's just my own thoughts when I read that response. So Spicer asks, what is your opinion on it? And Stoy says, I think I may reserve my thoughts on that for my piece. Again, not wanting to temper your opinions as we move along here. And I think that could happen if I did. Is that okay with you? Spicer says, sure, thank you. Stoy says, I would like to move on to another subject for discussion. I would just like to confirm for the record that I've never prior to this interview asked you any questions about your potential knowledge of steroid use by yourself or by Terri or by Kyron Horman. Is that correct? Spicer says, correct. Okay. Stoy says, did they ask you this? Spicer says, who is they? You got a lot of pronouns flying around. Laughs. Stoy, fair point. You're right. The good news is, as English, or should I say proper English, is my second language. Laughs. I use a copy editor. Allow me to rephrase, please. Did anyone in law enforcement at any time ask you about steroids or other illegal injectable supplements sometimes used in weight training or bodybuilding in your interviews in regards to this case? Spicer replies, your question was, did they ask me anything about steroids or anything injectable? Stoy laughs. Now who's throwing around the pronouns? Spicer laughs. Touche. I was asked about it very vaguely in the beginning. I told them I had never used them, and I did not believe that Terri ever did because she and I had very similar views against using them. And while we were on different supplement regimens when I was training for a marathon in 2008, I still remembered her to be knowledgeable about legal and effective nutritional supplements. I had no reason to believe she had used any kind of steroids. I can't say conclusively she did, but it would shock me. I just think it's very odd that she chose to keep this all in there, that she chose to keep this banter in here when they hadn't had any banter like this throughout any of the interviews before.
I was just going to say, was like she in some kind of bad mood or something? Because they seem to be like, Dede seems like she's a little bit irritated in this part of the interview. And then the other thing I want to point out too is she was, if you didn't hear it, I was training for a marathon in 2008. Like I was saying earlier, Dede was a runner. She was a long distance runner. And when I tell you she's out on the property next to the road, and there are a few places that she could have went to walk to a parking lot or something, or someplace where a car was parked. And to also point out, Terri, in her Facebook posts, she also starts running months prior to Kyron's disappearance.
Interesting.
So I thought, I don't know why, for whatever reason, I know she's a runner, and then all of a sudden Terry's running before Kyron comes up missing. It was almost like we got to be, I mean, I don't know what kind of shape Dede was in when Kyron came up missing. I know that her ex-boyfriend had talked about how she had like gotten out of shape and stuff, but when pictures started coming out of her, she didn't really look like she was, running. But that doesn't mean you don't have a lot of stamina to like quickly walk or to get somewhere fast or go on a good hike.
Right. Yep.
And here you've got Terri running. So they're looking for Kyron in the woods, and I just want to point that out. Like, there's so many hiking trails and everything around there. And then, of course, you have the Newberry Road right smack dab in the middle of where Dede was and the school. There's just, I find it like a little bit of a coincidence. So I just wanted to bring that up.
Right, me too. Stoy asks, why would it shock you if Terri had used steroids? Spicer replies, because a few years back, I recall Terri telling me that Kane was what she referred to as juicing, and that his behavior had become very aggressive and, impatient or overreactive with the kids, and she had discussed it with him, and he ignored her. Well, I'd like just to go on record and say that Kane has also accused Terri of being way too snappy and aggressive with the kids, and, we've discussed the fake color card system and things like that was accused on Terri. So it's just funny that they're accusing Kane of that and attributing it to steroids.
Well, yeah, and then you've got other people out there with their conspiracy theory that there's this huge like steroid sting thing out there, that Terri turned it in and Kane was involved, and that maybe Kyron came up missing because when Terri did a bunch of this stuff, that these police officers may have been involved with his disappearance because they were pissed that they get in trouble. I mean, this stuff will be later talked about in this interview, but I'm just saying, like, it just seems outrageous. Like a conspiracy theory, and it's ridiculous.
It is. Yep. Stoy asks, so for the record, when you say juicing, you are referring to illegal steroids, not my omega specials I make, correct? That was the only question they ever asked you, and you did not ask any follow-up questions like how long ago, etc., etc. And so would you characterize the way law enforcement had asked that question and their reaction to your response as disinterested or having nothing to do with the case? Spicer replied, I was never asked about Kane's use of steroids by either detectives or the grand jury. But yes, that is what she told me. She, as in Terri. I had actually forgotten all about it until she refreshed my recollection when I stayed there with her. To the best of my memory, I was asked just what I said. I answered as I just said and was never asked any follow-up questions, nor was it mentioned again to me by law enforcement. I don't know, or sorry, I don't think I ever really understood what they did or did not think in terms of my information if it was important to the case. But yes, they were disinterested from my perspective as to it was the only time I was ever asked about it over the course of 3.5 years. And so my assumption, they still are, but that is my assumption. So she starts this reply by saying, I was never asked about Kane's use of steroids by either detectives or the grand jury. But then she goes on and saying, but I was asked about it. But then they were disinterested. I don't understand. It's not
Wow.
clear to me.
I have the same thing highlighted too. I'm like, wait a minute.
That doesn't make any sense. You're contradicting yourself in the same question. And Stoy replies saying understood. So it's like, it just doesn't make sense. Stoy replies understood. You're referring to the time you stayed at the Horman home in late June 2010 through early July 2010. Late June to early July 2010, following Kane's service of the restraining order and her exclusive use of the home. Spicer, I am not sure about the exclusive use part. I don't really know anything about that or how that sort of thing worked. And I think for some reason I want to say Terri was not allowed to show anyone. Stoy, okay, tell me everything you know about that, but I would like you to see if you can provide me your recollection from what you were told about steroid use prior to your conversations about it that refreshed your memory. By the way, who else knows about this, if you know? Spicer says, Terri's attorney, Stephen House, also knows about this. Stoy says, how would you know that? Spicer said, because I helped load them up, what appeared to me to be syringes in a box, and we delivered it to her attorney's office, she said, at his request. She also located some canceled checks for what she said was Kane's payment for steroids. I don't remember who they were made out to, but it was not to cash. Stoy said, okay, understood. We will get back to that. I want to try to focus on what she told you a few years back. Do you recall what year? What even ballpark? Spicer said, I want to say, can't be sure. It was after her competition in 2005, and I'm tempted to say around that time they got married shortly after. I am not going to be much help in remembering this if you're asking me to be exact when I remembered from then on my own. Stoy said, nope, that's not what I'm asking. You're fine. I don't want to lead you, but let me ask you a few things that may help. Do you remember where you were during the conversation? Spicer said, I remember it was either the one and only time I had ever had lunch with Terri, or it was during the time she called my cell. Terri had a lot of drama, and so I was in a home and garden show class, and I recall saying things out loud to let her know I was not free to talk or respond as she was talking. So I was saying things like, I don't know. We should probably touch base on that when I am done here. Sounds good. Can we chat later? Stoy said, the brush up on the other party is not getting it. Is that right? Spicer said, yes, she was not getting it. And so I was like 50% paying attention. It was either during that call or at lunch. Other than that, I'm not remembering the timing so well.
And
Stoy's
right there, she's just like, she is talking like she's saying they're talking on the phone. And then later on, she was like, I don't know if I was on the phone with her or not. She also mentions it was the only time I ever had lunch with Terri. You stayed with her for 11 days. You had more than one lunches with Terri.
Yeah, exactly, right. It's just super, super bizarre. Um, I also highlighted on here that she acknowledges Terri had a lot of drama. And it's funny
Right.
because, we have heard that, and people don't want to believe when people have anything negative to say about Terri. But here she is in 2013 saying Terri had a lot of drama. So, Stoy asks, but would you say a few years before Kyron went missing? So based on that, it was 2007 or 2008. Do you remember if they were married at the time? And Spicer said, again, we were friends for a good number of years, but not close friends. I almost felt like she was calling me or talking to me because she had no other option at the time. Stoy says, got it. What did she say? And Spicer said, she said that Kane had been so aggressive with her and impatient with the children that she attributed to his juicing. She confronted him and she felt he did not listen to her. She told me that she called a detective and turned in Kane's cellar. The member at the gym, I used to know the name, but I really can't recall because I was in the early morning crowd and this guy was in the afternoon. I presume when they were there, or that's when they saw him. I had stopped going to the gym as them, or stopped going to the same gym as them after the first year or two I met them. Stoy asks, so she called a detective to turn in the cellar Kane was buying steroids from. Wasn't she concerned about the fact that buying them is also illegal and Kane could face charges? Spicer replied, she told me that she contacted the detective and said she would only be willing to turn over the information about someone selling steroids, but only if she could do so anonymously and without saying who was buying them, etc. Stoy asks, so it was your understanding that she was trying to work out a scenario that would stop Kane's use without him ever knowing it was her by turning in the person that sold them? Sort of like she gets approval to remain anonymous, she gives the tip, and then one day he comes home and says, hey honey, guess what? Oh, one day she comes home and says, hey honey, guess what? I heard at the gym you better stop or you could be arrested for it. Spicer said, yes, something like that. Except, and again, we have discussed it at one or both of these occasions, but that did not work out. The detective called her again directly and she was upset that there was further contact. From what I recall, I think that was the tone of what she was telling me. Stoy replies, understood. So you are thinking that it may have been why she was sort of wired about it and not hearing you to try to go about your day, but insisting on venting like she was very upset by it. Spicer said, yes, I think so. Stoy says, do you think she could have called you because your dad was law enforcement and she might need that sort of advice? I don't think so because she did not ask for any. So then what? Did Kane find out? And Spicer said, I just remember there was some sort of investigation of the guy. And I really don't know if Kane ever found out about it or knows to this day. If the seller or anyone was arrested or anything else at the time, I don't remember. This is how much I paid attention to it then until Terri reminded me of it. So Stoy says, okay, now why is it that Terri was discussing it with you when you were staying at her house in June 2010 in your view? Spicer said, because after the restraining order was served, I guess she realized where Kane was headed. It was sort of like if he was going to badmouth her, and her estimation, it was false. But anyway, Kane had skeletons in his own closet, sort of thing. She told her lawyer, Howes, and she said he instructed her to bring the syringes and the canceled check to his office, and we did. I would just like to pause here and say I have read every single page in the Kane and Terri Horman custody and divorce court documents. I've read over 600 pages, and the steroid syringes have not been brought up once, not one time.
Right.
So if they were wanting to use this against Kane, they never did. They chose not to.
Well,
So
they either chose not to or it's not true.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so there's no proof of this. So I'll continue. We're almost to the end of the interview where it becomes just a big old rumor. Stoy. So was Terri saying that Kane was using steroids behind her back and she found this, or that she knew that was having some sort of reaction as last time, or she just learned once he was out of the home, or what? Was she suggesting this to you like it had something to do with Kyron's disappearance? Spicer replied, I got the impression she did not know, or at least did not know when the last time he was using them was, but it gets fuzzy for me there because it is my belief up until the time the restraining order was served, in my opinion, she would have tried to protect Kane from law enforcement finding out. So I don't know if she told law enforcement, but it would surprise me. Terri was always very family-centric. She would protect her family unit, and that is why she did the turning in thing. This would seem the same to me until he made those murder for hire allegations. So did you get the impression from her that she thought that her allegation of Kane's steroid use had anything to do with Kyron's disappearance? Spicer said no, not at all. Stoy said nothing like maybe this happened as some sort of retribution against her for turning someone in previously, or against Kane if they thought he was involved, because after all, she says he was the one buying it back then. So here's Stoy trying to control the narrative and implant, trying to sway Dede into saying, well, maybe that's why. I mean, that's what I hear Stoy's doing right here. Nothing like, well, maybe this happened. Yeah, that's just totally weird that she's trying to sway Dede into agreeing with this false made up lie that she started. But Spicer says no. She told me she had no idea who was responsible for Kyron's disappearance or why, which contradicts what she said earlier, because earlier in the interview she said Terri was blaming it on Rudy Sanchez.
Yep.
Spicer continues, the only possibility she came up with after the fact, because of his past behavior and the fact that he showed up at the door demanding $10,000, yeah, there we go, was her idea, it was the landscaper. He was the only person acting like a criminal at the time. Stoy asks, have you ever seen a text of hers involving the custody situation after the fact, after the Rudy Sanchez sting? And she called police twice that day, evening, that ended with Mark 1 for the FBI. Spicer said, I may have. If I did, I don't remember it specifically. Stoy said, she specifically said the FBI, who has only ever assisted in the case and has no jurisdiction presence in Kyron's case. I was just wondering if you had any thoughts on that. Spicer said, no, I don't have any idea what she meant. Stoy then writes, is it possible that illegal steroid use or sales and the recent public outing, there was an ongoing federal investigation with the emphasis on police and gym members that included persons familiar to the Hormans, contributed to the circumstances involving the disappearance of Kyron Horman? Has it been excluded by having more law enforcement investigating themselves? So that's the actual end of the interview. From that point on, Dede does not have any more words. She doesn't talk anymore. There's no on the record response like they kind of alluded to earlier.
She literally calls it roid rumors and boys in blue coincidence or clue, which you have already posted. You've already read through all of this. Can you just kind of tell us a little bit and touch bases on, kind of like the police officers, and how they were arrested and how,
absolutely,
like all of that information a little bit?
So I had heard the rumor that, like you had said, that
this big conspiracy theory.
This big conspiracy that Terri had tipped off the FBI to some steroid ring. And honestly, that sounds outrageous, right? So it's like, where do you even start to go to fact check something like that? Well, once I started to try to fact check it, I found out that it started here with Blink on Crime. Again, I find that just so weird that...
And that's what I realized today when I got irritated and messaged you, like, what the hell? Well, you know what? I have to give you props that you left that group, stopped talking to all of them about all of their BS a hell of a lot sooner than me, because I was stuck in that shit for over a year. Just saying.
Well, they almost had me, and that's where I've made this comment in the group. Research is like a passion and a hobby of mine, and I will get to the truth if it's the last thing I do. So I don't just take somebody's word for it. I will go and figure it out my dang self. And so when I heard this, I was like, how do you even go about starting to fact check this rumor that Terri was this I don't know, this freaking she brought down the ring, you know, it just sounds so
Right.
big and crazy. But what really happened was apparently a Canby police officer was seen buying steroids from somebody that was okay, long story short, some people committed some insurance fraud and they could not prove it, but they were trying to do an investigation and get this guy for insurance fraud. So this guy had like crashed or burned his car, said it got stolen, but he had stripped all of the aftermarket parts. So he got the insurance money, but then he was also selling the aftermarket parts. And so they were watching this guy, and he was a part of the steroid ring. He was also selling and using steroids and was buying these steroids from this man that lives in Canby. Well, apparently, a police officer bought steroids from this man that was under surveillance for insurance fraud in uniform. He was in uniform and seen buying steroids from this man. And that they went and they reported that. And the chief of police in Canby was very good friends with this police officer. Apparently so good friends that they lived together. They were like roommates, like brothers. And so he didn't do anything. He didn't reprimand the police officer. He tried to get it under the rug and let the police officer go without any repercussions. Well, that's when the FBI got involved, and they said that the police are now trying to cover up. There is a cover up happening, and that's how this all came crashing down. Terri Horman had nothing to do with this. It was because of the series of events that I just explained to you. Yes, there was a legal steroid ring once the FBI got involved and started then surveilling the guy that supplied the steroids to the guy who was getting investigated for insurance fraud. They found out that this guy, he was selling steroids to all kinds of police officers. It wasn't just the one from Canby. That's how this all came crashing down. It wasn't because of Terri Horman. And the only place that this rumor started is Blink on Crime. And I'm glad we're ending here because we didn't start with this, but Blink on Crime is a very, very, very sketchy news source. You should take anything you read from there with a grain of salt.
I actually have some information on them, but I want to touch basis on part of this Blink on Crime thing because I kind of highlighted something that says request for comments from Kyron Horman through his attorney, Brett Engel, regarding the allegations that he has either purchased or sold illegal steroids was not or has not been returned at the time of this publication. However, in the article published in the include quote from Kyron Horman, it seems that Kane confirms Ms. Spicer's assertion that Terri Horman did not use illegal steroids, but rather nutritional supplements and had moved past those very quickly after her bodybuilding competition. Kane said he noticed a sharp shift in her behavior, saying she became self-centered and short-tempered. She's not eating a lot of food. She's exercising twice a day. She's up at 4 o'clock in the morning. She's not sleeping at night. So we just get general irritable behavior towards anyone around her, he said. He said he consumed over-the-counter stimulants such as fat burners in high doses. In 4 months between, he said consumed fat burners in high doses for 4 months between January and April and shed 62 pounds, dropping from 185 to 123 pounds, he said. At the end of April, with her muscle bulked up and skin glistening with a bronze tan, she completed the Emerald Cup bodybuilding competition in Bellevue, Washington. As Christina Stoy, editor-in-chief, was able to independently confirm Ms. Spicer's account of alleged steroid use and ensuing investigation of a gym member, as told by Terri Horman, the source an associate of Terri Horman, Dede Spicher, and Kyron Horman, who declined to be identified, went on to say that at the time it was really common knowledge who was using steroids and who was selling them, was not aware previously that Terri Horman claimed to have instigated contact with law enforcement to turn in the seller. The source declined to identify the seller and could not say for certain if he was charged, and likely would not away, given the request not to disclose the source's name on the record.
Well, I can tell you that all the people involved in the steroid ring were charged and brought to justice. Yeah. It was a really big deal. And the main person, the Canby man that provided the steroids, the original person who he testified against everybody. He came and it was something that had to happen. So even if that person says we don't know if they got charged or anything, yeah, they did. And like I said, Terri Horman had nothing to do with that.
I know. I saw your post in the Facebook group about everything, and I'm just like, oh my gosh. And then when I started reading this, I'm like, are you serious? Like, this is just another conspiracy. And it just baffles me that they cannot think for themselves. Literally every single theory that they come up with is in some kind of sleuths. I hate mentioning them in my lives, but it is just aggravating because everything's just misinformation, especially where it comes from. And, you know, like we just got done talking about, you know, Blink on Crime. I'll show that in a minute, but I want to point out Terri Horman allegedly, because I have not been able to prove it, did an interview with Blink on Crime. And Stacy Green from World Soldiers actually posts about it over in her Facebook. I went over there and grabbed the information because, you know, I just find it strange. Like, Terri was there and it never, what was it? They just never used the interview because they were afraid that it was going to like.
Well, that was Stacy's speculation. You know, Christina Stoy had said she had interviewed Terri and she had this interview for a long time, but she just chose not to post it for some reason. And what Kyron Horman World Soldiers is saying here is, why is Blink on Crime covering for Terri? There is only one reason Blink on Crime would not post the interview, and that is because she knows it ends up incriminating Terri. If Terri's interview was favorable to Terri, Blink on Crime would have posted it. But why is a crime blogger siding with someone who pleaded the fifth, lost custody of her daughter, and prohibited the court from entering her own daughter, or is prohibited by the court from entering her own daughter's public school? So
yeah, and then this is what went with that post too. It was something, I think, in the comments here on Blink on Crime.
Yes, these are from the comments on Blink on Crime, and it's a well-known commenter and a well-known supporter of Terri from back then, and she is replying on a post about Dr. Phil, you know, talking about going over Terri Horman's 2 episodes. And she says, obviously, Terri ranted defensively about Kyron's DNA in the truck bed because that's what the MCSO polygrapher, as substantiated in another case, was an error in link above, grilled her over. And any mother whose son played in the family truck would know that's crap, to include the Youngs, even though she never raised her sons. So why is she selling something someone with an average IQ would know is crap? Number 1, hang Terri. Number 2, motive. Number 3, fears someone from her past did it. Number 4, question mark, question mark, question mark. Don't forget the fact that Ibashi never asked a very obvious, reasonable follow-up question to her old information that Kyron's DNA was found in the truck bed. Even something benign would suffice, like, for instance, was Kyron's DNA found in or on any of her or Tony's vehicles? So what I think Stacy is saying in this post and including this screenshot here is that, just like the book says, the police told Terri that they found Kyron's DNA in the bed of Kane's truck. And Terri seemed uncomfortable about that, Desiree remembered. She shrugged it off. I was asking, why would Kyron's DNA be in the bed of Kane's truck? No one had any answers. Desiree wasn't told what had been found. Blood, saliva, urine, hair, something else. So that's an excerpt from the book Boy Missing, which was released in 2020. The comment was from 2019, so before the book was released. And what Stacy is saying is, how did this commenter know about the blood DNA? Is it from Terri and the interview that Blink on Crimes had? Because that's the only other place it would have came from. And they chose to never release that interview for whatever reason.
Well, yeah, and then again, like, that's, you know, why does Christina Stoy act like she wants to try to protect Terri, even in the way she goes along with this interview with Dede Spicher? There's just comments after comments after comments of Dede or Stoy protecting Terri, or she's agreeing with Dede while she's protecting Terri.
Right. And not only doing that, those type of things, but then spreading misinformation and starting rumors that are just bizarre, like the steroid thing. She also had rumors surrounding the landscaper. If you go on the landscaper and you read what she has written there, there's some weird, unverifiable rumors that she's the one who started them. And, you know, Blink on Crime, she hasn't been, her page is no longer accessible unless you use the Wayback Machine. I just think that, I don't know, I think she stopped doing what she's doing probably because she got a lot of heat for it. If you go and you try to look up and research Blink on Crime, you'll find people writing about her in unfavorable light, saying that, just like we're saying here, that she doesn't care what she's reporting and that she reports misinformation, she lies, she...
Well, in this world, word of mouth that was written up, Web Sleuth's owner, she straight up says that she doesn't even allow links from Blink on Crime in her Web Sleuths. I pulled this up. I've actually went through this and read this before. It was inside of our Facebook group. And I'm like, yeah, I just kind of want to show this. It's like, it's not just me and Kaylia that think, you know, there's just some weird stuff here going on. There have been a lot of different people that have talked about Blink on Crime, and just incorrect information, or how, like, Christina Stoy really likes to cause a lot of drama inside her blogs and stuff that she's writing. And in that, the drama that she adds turns into rumor.
Yeah.
Just like the steroid sting that's in this one.
I mean, we have a group of people to this day that are going around spreading this rumor that Terri busted a steroid sting. And that is why Multnomah County Sheriff's Office doesn't like her.
Yeah.
Multnomah
County Sheriff's Office doesn't like her, and that the police officers could have something to do with, you know, because they theorize over everything, and that,
and it's all because,
you know, the
of
police...
this.
Yeah, the police officers could actually be the reason why Kyron's gone or kidnapped or dead or whatever, because they got mad at Terri for, you know, busting a bunch of people. But it's just a bunch of BS is what it is.
Yes.
You know, and then you have this former criminal prosecutor tells you all you need to know. I didn't want anyone to go to crime profiteer site of being Blink on Crime, so I recommended Web Sleuths as the better option. Which then again, I will just point out, some Web Sleuths, not Web Sleuths themselves, but the people that are commenting in Web Sleuths, they all theorize, they all talk about it and discuss it. But what they say you cannot take for a fact. None of it is verifiable information. They're just talking and discussing, which is fine, but you can't take what those people are saying, turn it around, twist it around, and make it sound like, hey, I found this information and, you know,
yeah,
it's a fact that this and this and this happened. they got this wrong, but still have to do good work. In many cases, it is very difficult to move away from the traditional conceptual approaches. People have asked me to expose Blink as a fraud. I'm trying to write a post here, so I am going to do this fast. Her real name is Shannon Stoy, a phony crime profiteer. And then you have this True Nelson. I found it just, this is inside our Facebook group. All you have to do is in the search icon, put in word of mouth. I'll repost it for everybody. You can come here and read about it if you want. But even Blink on Crime, the Wikipedia, inflammatory tactics commonly employed by story according to critics. That in itself, I mean, here we got Wikipedia.
You can Google Blink on Crime and see it. This is one of them, but I know I've read others where people have said that that Christina Stoy has ruined their life over false information that they're putting out about them and things like that. And it's just like I said, I mean, that Rudolfo Sanchez, that she went and put some weird stuff. I'm not going to, say that we don't know his involvement in Kyron's disappearance or not. We know that he cooperated with the police. I do know that. But I do know that what she said about him is not true either, from what I was able to go fact check. And it just is weird that she's just making all these like weird rumors to kind of deflect from the main focus that these are the facts that we know. Kyron is missing, and Terri was the last person to see him. And
I'm sure, like, we're even going to get a lot of heat because we're going over the Blink on Crime interview in our last 4-hour live, but we did that because it's the only place that Dede ever publicly talked. That's why we're going through it now, so we can show everybody, like, these are the things that we believe, these are the things that we don't. But we also know that her interview was also looked at by KGW News here in Portland, Oregon, and Kyle Beloshi works for News Channel 8, and me and Kaylee really trust him. He's done a lot of work on this case. I'm sure he took a look of that interview when they're saying that it was like verified. I've actually, in my opinion, I feel like he was probably the one that looked at it, verified some information that was in it, and maybe he didn't verify it to an extent. Maybe he just verified it as, we know Dede did this interview.
Well,
but he doesn't know any more than us, if what Dede is saying is true, because this is her story. Everybody in Kyron's case has a story. Desiree has her own story. Kane has his own story. Kyron has his story. This is Dede's story. It doesn't mean that everything that everyone says in their story is absolutely 100% true.
Right. Everybody's entitled to their own perspective because that's just the truth. We can only see the world from our very own eyes, right? So
exactly.
But I will say, if you're gonna ask me who I think Dede Spicher would be the most comfortable with giving a freaking interview like this, I would say it would be Blink on Crime, because she's coddled Terri, and I know Dede knows that, and so that's probably why she was like, yeah, I'll talk to Blink on Crime, because she's the one person that will not ask me those hard questions. And that's kind of what was alluded to Terri when Terri was giving her interviews in 2016. I think Bruce McCain is the one who said it. Or maybe it wasn't, maybe it was C.W. Jensen, but somebody made a comment saying that maybe part of the deal of Terri finally interviewing was, you're not asking me hard questions. Because some of those questions, you would have hoped that they would have done some follow-up questions that were a little harder, but they didn't. I will say Dr. Phil did a good job, because he did catch her slipping up, and she definitely has lies, changes in stories in her Dr. Phil's interview. So he did a good job. I wish Blink on Crime would have released Terri's interview. I have no idea why she chose not to, other than she was probably like I said, people were giving Blink on Crime a lot of heat, and maybe finally she poked the wrong bear, and she was like, I have to stop doing this, and she took a step back. I don't know why she has decided not to anymore, but Blink on Crime, if her page, she no longer pays for it to remain active. All of this
Right.
information is on the archive.org. So
Yep. Well, and the other thing is too, I mean, Dede already did one interview with People's Magazine in August of 2010, and she already had a reputable person to do an interview with, but she did her interview, but it wasn't very long at all. It didn't have a lot of information in it. She's just saying the same thing that she's been saying, that she's cooperating, she's doing everything she can, blah, 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 even though
yeah.
Kyron's parents are completely saying the opposite during that time, that she was not cooperating. But yeah, she had the chance to tell a reputable person, and then she chooses to do this in 2013, 3 years later. Just
Yeah,
like the
right.
polygraph test. Like, I'm going to not do the polygraph test in 2010, but I'm going to do it 3 years later. Let me just find out ways to pass the polygraph test if she passed it. Or, just the fact that a narcissist could actually convince themselves for, whatever I did in 2010, I did it for a good reason. And if she can convince herself of that polygraph test that she took in 2013, she could have easily,
Yeah.
passed. And Tabitha brings up a good point. She's like, starting rumors will get you attention and it can make you famous. And I'm telling you, I know every single sleuth and in every single discussion group that when we talk about Dede, this is where we go.
Yeah.
Straight to Blink on Crime.
Yep.
One particular person that wants to protect Dede, I won't say her name, but wants to protect Dede at all cost. Well, in the Blink on Crime interview, and I've heard it 1,000 times. I could never say anything bad about Dede without this interview being thrown in my face.
Well, I'm glad we could go over it piece by piece and think about it and how things just don't make sense. Like I said, she either had the worst attorney ever, or she's not being honest. Because I've never heard a criminal defense attorney let it go down the way she's saying it went down. But what's interesting, you mentioned about why didn't she go back to People Magazine? I think that's a great point, because the People Magazine reporter is the same reporter that Terri went to for her very first interview. It's the same one. Her name is Elaine Aradiaz. So she's Elaine Aradiaz from People spoke with Dede in August 2010. Elaine Aradiaz spoke with Terri in January 2016. And then she spoke with another reporter from ABC in January 2016. But they kind of partnered and did that with People. So Elaine,
I saw
kind
that
of got
clip.
it kind of got swept under. And
and Terri Horman ended up telling her in that interview that she did with her too, that there was going to be like a reconciliation thing going on between her and her daughter soon, and that's still not happened.
Terri has said in every interview she's given a different response to that question. And not only that, in the interview that her son James did with that other content creator, they asked him about it, and his response was that Kane tells me she's not done anything. She told me she's done stuff, but it's been held up by the court or some bullshit like that. But that's his response. So again, it's just, and that's totally different than what she told the 3 interviewers. She has never been honest about that, but we know the truth. There's never been a filing once since June 2014. She abandoned her daughter because she didn't want to cooperate with the investigation into Kyron's disappearance. And I just stand here today asking those people who believe Dede cleared herself somehow, why can't Terri do that too? And Terri has way more at stake to do it. She chooses not to. So riddle me that.
Right. Well, she says she got an attorney, and she knew that if she got an attorney, she didn't have to talk. And she ain't really spoken since, except for here recently. It's just really crazy that, she's kind of talking a little bit more, I don't know. It's just really crazy. Tabitha says, yep, negative attention is still attention, and she made money off of it, and it is sad, but it's very screwed, and it is.
Yeah.
So we made a promise to everybody that we weren't going to have a 4-hour live, but we did do
Woohoo!
a 3-hour live.
We just made it. You guys
You
are
know
the
what?
best.
Right? And everybody kind of like stuck around a little bit. I mean, I know it's kind of like, it may have been a tiny bit boring for anybody because we're having to read so much. But I mean, this is a lot of information. And if
Yes.
you are a big Kyron Horman fanatic like we are, and we want to know and we want to dig deep, like, you have to listen to things like this. You have to research this yourself. You can download this stuff. Kaylia said she was going to put the links in the
Yep,
comments,
they're there.
so that people will have
they're
them.
in the Facebook group. Sorry, they didn't fit in the comments, but they are in the Facebook group, so you can find them in the Facebook group.
Yes, and I can also put those links in the community page here on YouTube. You just go to our YouTube channel, and you'll see live, you'll see shorts, you'll see videos, and if you keep scrolling over to the right, you'll see community. You click on that, you'll see things that I post in our community. I always post the stuff that we go through in our lives. We post them in the community. We post them on our Facebook group, Kyron Horman Case Revisited, discussions and case studies. And yeah, we just want to thank everybody for being here. We really appreciate everyone. I know this was another long live, but like I said, we're just trying to put out a lot of information. And in order to do that, we're going to have some long lives. Say a prayer for Kyron. Say a prayer for his parents. His parents have to live every single day their normal lives, and they have to live the nightmare of Kyron missing. He's been gone for 13 years. He came up missing on June 4th, 2010 in Portland, Oregon, from Skyline Elementary School at a science fair, approximately between 8:45 and 9 a.m. in the morning. If you have seen anything in that area on June 4th, 2010, either days prior or days after, anything suspicious, please call the Multnomah County Sheriff's Office. The tip line number is 503-988-0560. You can also contact your local FBI. And you can also get a hold of the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children at 1-800-THE-LOST. No tip is too small. Never forget that. If you have not gone through our Facebook or our YouTube channel, and you live in the area and you were in the area on June 4th, 2010, I really suggest going through and watching the videos for no other reason than maybe something would spark your memory. Maybe you'll see something and go, oh my God, I do. I remember this. It could be a white van. It could be a red car. It could be someone getting in and out of their vehicles that you thought just looked suspicious, or something, a vehicle or people somewhere around the school hanging out. Remember all of the different roads in that area: Skyline Boulevard, Newberry Road, Old Germantown Road, Logie Road. You have Rocky Point. You have, let's see, Highway 30, Sauvie Island, Moreland Road. There's also the area around Rainbow Lake, Rocky Point Road that goes onto Highway 30. All of these little roads and stuff, these are all the places that Multnomah County Sheriff's Office has been looking into. It could be because of Terry's cell phone pings. It could be because there's been eyewitnesses accounts, but there's videos in our channel. If you want to take a look, take a look. If not, that's fine. I'm just, if you're living in the area and you were around then, it could help Kyron. Yeah, I am really, really glad that everybody made it here. The live went great. Thanks again so much, Kalia, for being here. I love doing things like this with you. I always have a lot of fun.
Me too.
I love the
Me
way
too.
we go back and forth. I mean, I think it's amazing.
Yep, we're a good
So-
team, and it's awesome to have our members here joining us in the chat. So thank you all, and thanks for inviting me and throwing everything together, because I know you're the one who puts everything on the screen. So thank you for that too.
Thank you. All right, everyone. I always leave with the intro. This was Dede Spicher. Yeah, I have it written down because I just had a brain fart. Oh my God, where did it go?
Actions speak louder than words. Dede Spicher,
Thank
actions
you.
speak louder than words. Yes.
The Blink on Crime interview from September 4th, 2013. My paper got shoved way behind me because I didn't need it anymore. Anyway, guys, nice having you here. Have a good night.
Bye.